Okay, a very good morning to all of you. So we've gathered today again in the mains revision class and for students of boot camp. And today the agenda for discussion is international relations. Okay, so far we have done the classes on polity. Post that you had social justice, you had governance. So the last remaining part of GS2 is the part, this is international relations. Okay? People online, if you are able to see and hear. With respect to WHO, UNSC, I'll tell you what is the flow of topics today, what all we can do overall in this. There are some topic of current affairs which will be, again, I have been spoken that some topics will be done in mains current affairs, but by and large, this is a very comprehensive document. WHO page, till now there was only one question. I'll explain to you the rationale, etc., of what topics have been chosen, etc. Okay, so I think your printouts, your handout should come in 2 or 3 minutes. Till then, I'll just quickly do an overview of the subject. The syllabus for this, of course, you have 4 headings here. And more importantly, you will get 4 questions in your paper. 2 out of them will be 10 markers and 2 will be 15 markers. Now, in this, main thing to know here is, first of all, the coverage of the topics. Now this is again a topic which requires some subject knowledge, it also requires good vocabulary, and it also requires some articulation at your end also, right? All these 3 things are there. Now if you just look at the syllabus, India and its neighborhood, we talk about the relations. In fact, how we start generally is we talk about India's neighborhood. And when we say India's neighborhood, right now there is a lot of flux, I can say a lot of changes that have happened, right? In fact, not just in our neighborhood, but even in the global sphere, a lot of changes have happened, right? So we will examine all of that. Then there are, of course, bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements which are involving India or affecting India's interest. So here, if I say in regional groupings, the moment we do neighborhood, we talk about SAARC, its failure, should it be there or not? BIMSTEC, and even right now BIMSTEC is facing challenges. If I take into account India's Act East policy, then again ASEAN becomes important, right? So on and so forth. Then there are global groupings. Any example that you've done? In your prelims you would have seen so many of them. I can talk about G20. Any other global grouping? There are many, right? So within then again, and of course I can talk about, when I talk about other institutions, I'll also talk about United Nations. And why is there a call for example, reformed multilateralism? This year, there was a prelims question also where they had replaced multilateralism with multiculturalism. And this is always a topic in the last 2-3 years which has been spoken a lot about, that what is, for example, multilateralism and why is there a need for it? Okay, so we'll also examine that. Effect in policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interest, India's diaspora. अब देखो, India diaspora also is a very small unit but a very effective unit. Out of the 4, you never know, direct question on diaspora can also be asked. So in our document also we've done a comprehensive analysis on diaspora as well. Effect of policies and politics of developed and developing. The moment you see this topic, what comes to mind? Which theme comes to mind? ठीक है? There is North-South debate, and with that I can also talk about South-South cooperation, and the moment I say this, I would also be reminded of non-alignment movement and whether it is relevant or not, should it be scrapped, what are its current set of achievements, etc. This is also something we can talk about. Other than that, here also, there have been talk about whether India is voice of the global South. India has a lot of credentials, and based on those credentials, again a claim is made that should India get a permanent seat in the UNSC, which also brings into account UNSC reforms as well. Okay, and the last one, for example, the important international institutions, agencies, fora, and their structure and mandate. Now, this always is a tricky topic. Okay, in fact, if we see last year also, last year there was no question on this particular aspect, but there was a specific question on terrorism, and in that they had referred the United Nations Counter-Terrorism Committee. So terrorism as a topic you will also see in IR, and terrorism as a topic you will again do in more detail in internal security also. So based on that combined knowledge, some of these questions can be asked. Second, when COVID-19 was going on, in fact, how WHO dealt with COVID-19 pandemic was also asked. And in that, of course, you may have also had read about that China was also seen to be favoring, WHO was seen to be favoring China. So those kind of allegations, how a body is functioning, in fact, a very good topic here can also be again WTO, which you read in GS3. Almost since 2022, WTO has been stalled. The dispute settlement body, especially because of works of USA, has not been able to have a very proper mandate and structure. And because of this, this institution also is not doing that well. Okay, so when we go through the institutions, I'll also go through, for example, BRICS, we'll go through SCO, because in SCO also recent summit has happened, in BRICS also the recent declaration has happened. Okay, in fact, even in BIMSTEC, very recently the 6th BIMSTEC summit happened. Okay, so in whenever there is a new outcome that is there, which that becomes important for us to know. Okay, so these are the topics that are directly mentioned. Now, the questions that are being asked in the exam, you will have different level of difficulties. Out of 4 questions, at least 2 questions will be relatively direct, and the other 2 questions will require a lot of analysis on your part. So whenever we are doing topic, in fact, before even starting right from India's neighborhood, I'll also go through what challenges or changes the world order is facing right now. Okay, I'll give you around 14 points to keep in mind what is happening exactly in the globe. All these 14 points you can use across your papers also, number 1, and of course you can use it this in IR. Because every time, because right now as we are speaking, the world is talking about Modi 2.0 and Modi 3.0 and Trump 2.0. And Trump is also talking about MAGA. What is MAGA? M-A-G-A. Make America Great Again. And this is similar to what he used to say during Trump 1.0. He spoke about America First policy and America withdrawing from its all the global arms. Although the moment I say this, just now, US and Israel almost have a concerted attack on Iran. And all the 3 nuclear facilities, right from Natanz, Fordo, okay, they have again been a point of attack, which again becomes an important emerging topic in the scheme of things, right? So this is our agenda, this is how we'll do it. Now, before I start, I'll also tell you how you should understand this particular topic. So this is how I'll be proceeding. I'll just first of all tell you about foreign policy. In that, I'll tell you phases of foreign policy. Okay, where I'll refer to Dr. S. Jaishankar's 6 phases. Second, we'll also see what is world order and how this world order is changing at this point of time. What are the changes or tectonic shifts? After we are done with this, directly we move to India's neighborhood. And I start neighborhood talking to you about China, because China has an overbearing influence on all the other neighbors. So we start with China and then we do all the other neighbors, right? Now, the moment we are done with neighborhood, then we also move to the other part. This is where I transition also into the Act East part, and while talking about Act East, we will also discuss, for example, ASEAN, plus some linked topics, for example, when we are doing neighborhoods, of course, we will do the neighborhood, but we'll also do institutions, for example, here. This becomes important. And after the Act East part, then we move to the other major powers, where I talk about USA, Japan, Russia, EU. While talking of EU, We'll also discuss France, because now India-France relations for at least 2 years have been a lot in the news. Post this, we move to other areas where we also touch upon the part of Persian Gulf, or I should say Middle East. I'll also be discussing about Iran. Then we move to portions of Central Asian republics, Africa, and then we move to other areas. For example, we'll talk about SCO, major organizations, what is happening here, and then I'll take diaspora, multilateralism, and overall UN reforms, and within UN reforms we'll discuss both India's candidature, etc. This is the overall flow of topics, and if you do it in this particular manner, you first of all you'll get a lot of clarity what is happening in the world, and theme by theme a lot of portions will get clear in your mind. Okay, now one more thing, some topics are again emerging topics. Okay, so we need to know exactly what stands to take, and right now again we are in June, so almost in the middle or end of July there will be one updation video on IR. It will be a short video, but especially with respect to what is happening in the Middle East, let's say, okay, or a couple of institutions which are again in news which have not been covered overall here will be covered as a part of updation. Okay, but major all this chunk you will get a fair understanding from today's class itself. All right, this is how we plan to proceed. Now let's start. Right, directly we jump to what is Indian foreign policy, right? Any idea what is foreign policy? What keyword should you know? These are just peripheral topics. This will help you understand the overall topic better. What is foreign policy? Okay, some total of strategic interests and needs. People online? Engagements, okay. And I hope people also are clear with the flow of the lecture, how we have planned. Okay, anybody else? You spoke about national interest, yes, anybody? What is foreign policy? Any keyword that comes to mind? We use this term so many times, right? Because the moment I say foreign policy, then we move to what are objectives of foreign policy. And then, for example, we move to different phases of foreign policy, right? Dekho, foreign policy ultimately is the pursuit of national interest. Okay? Now, national interest will have two components basically. One will always be core component. That, for example, we want economic prosperity. This will always be at the core, but the means to do it would change with the respective governments, yes or no? So different governments would have their own prerogative, but the main thing is to always keep national interest at the core. Right? So a very simple definition of foreign policy is that the tools, the techniques or the strategies which a nation use to ultimately pursue its national interest. Are we clear on this? Very simple definition. In this definition, main thing only to just underline if you can right now is this term, national interest. Right? Which is why it is also famously said, in fact for US also, US does not have any permanent friends or enemy, it has only the permanent interest. Which again is a very realist and I should say a very practical way of looking at the world. So you will also choose your friends and enemies as and when it is convenient for you. So the core deciding part here is national interest. I hope this is simple definition, everybody is clear on this. Okay, the US wala part you can also add no permanent friends in case you want to write, or enemies, it is only the permanent interests which again is signified by the national interests. ठीक है? हाँ. Now, what are the objectives of a foreign policy? Ab dekho, why these points? These points, in fact, sometimes you have to ask a question. What is the changing goal of Indian foreign policy in 21st century? So if you already know what are the objectives, the core objectives will remain same, but please remember the means to do it can change. For example, if India wants to enhance its security, the previous government had a different approach, We can say the current government has a more muscular approach, more direct approach. Yes or no? The more use of modern warfare, we see precision strikes, we see calibrated precision strikes. Yes or no? So here objectives would remain same, but the means to do it would change. And when I say means to do it, it also depends on the nation's number one important thing is capacity. A developed nations versus developing nation, main difference किसमें है? Capacity में. USA can afford to have a lot of expenditure on hard power, but the developing nations cannot, right? So objectives, number one, very important, pursuit of territorial integrity and sovereignty, pursuit of international peace and security, very self-explanatory terms hai. And for each of them, we'll have an example. For example, when I say ensuring territorial sovereignty and integrity, you know what is CPEC? China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is a part of BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. Why did India object to BRI or CPEC? It was passing through POK and it was violating our, right? So this is one reason why. Pursuit of international peace and security. Is this also mentioned in our DPSP or constitution? Which article? No, which one? But 51, acha, okay. Right, any other example of how India has demonstrated its pursuit of international peace? Very good example. One of the highest contributor we have to UN peacekeeping operations, which is known as Blue Helmets. Yes or no? Next, again, overall safeguarding our national interest. Yes, the means to do it would change. Protecting Indian diaspora. Right? Now, diaspora always has been a core part of Indian foreign policy, but in the recent times, as we will see, the focus on outreach of diaspora and saving them has increased further, right? Which is why, in fact, you will have, if you remember, Namaste Trump, Howdy Modi, etc. This is just one way to outreach. Other than that, diaspora, right from evacuation, okay, right from, again, having them through remittances, bonds, etc. A lot more focus is there on Indian diaspora. Yes or no? The last one is advancing the global standing of India. What does this mean? No, but how would you link it to any example that you know? Yes, our aspirations. And we say that, yes, of course, if we proclaim ourselves to be Vishwaguru, but most important is, India sees itself in the committee of high table of nations, right? That we see that our credentials being a civilizational state, very strong credentials for human rights, for support of democracy, for peace, for being a responsible state. So we also see ourselves advancing in the global standing, yes or no? So again, through our credentials only we can talk about this, right? So ये जो basic points हैं, if you are again stuck on a question that again imperatives of foreign policy and what exactly the foreign policy tries to do, these points will come to your rescue. Direct question बहुत मुश्किल इस पे आए, इस पे applied question आएगा, which again I would share with you in the 1 or 2 slides later. But this again forms the backbone of our standing on IR. Okay. Now, phases of Indian foreign policy. This again is only for our quick understanding and revision. Right? If you still get a question आ क्या सकता है? This can be a permanent, this can be a question. What are the continuity and change in Indian foreign policy? Which is a very analytical question, which requires you to give a lot of examples. But to answer questions like this, I just quickly, in maybe 5-6 minutes, try to quickly give you an overview. Now here we will be again borrowing from post-independence also, some part of world history also. But please remember, there are certain phases. And every phase either ends or start with a year, which is very important in Indian history. And through this, you can again have a broad idea how has Indian state performed overall from its independence to the recent times, right? Is this clear? Okay, ठीक है. Now, the very first phase which we are starting with is from 1947 to 62. What happened in 62? Okay, so we know, and we'll also see this very shortly, what happened in the Indo-China conflict overall. This was a phase of optimistic non-alignment. Just remember one thing here, Nehruvian idealism. Okay, some keywords. One is Nehruvian idealism, you can write. Second write down, again guided by Panchsheel. Now here the nation quickly wanted, because we had just gotten decolonized, we wanted development. So there was a lot of idealism in us, right? Main focus was development of people to remove them from poverty. That is the main core here. Again, principles like Panchsheel, although principles like Panchsheel, we will again have a relook at it the moment we go through this. So main thing here is, main idea is development. Here also you write NAM. Formation of NAM again happened here. And please note the term optimistic non-alignment. Right? The context here is, the word was during a Cold War. Cold War mein word is divided between two sides. One led by US, one led by USSR. And India chose non-alignment because we did not want to pick or choose any specific side. We wanted to keep our options open. Second, our experiences of the 200 years of colonial rule told us that if you choose and be with one part, you already constrain your choices, right? So here, Cold War is the basic background. India being a part of NAM, again here India will support the cause of South Africa, decolonization of, South Korea, decolonization of Africa. So a lot of things would happen. Main core element is optimistic non-alignment. Just to redefine this for you, right? Now in the second phase, now this is going to be a very challenging phase. Why? First of all, 1962, with India, China, there will be a conflict on the borders. And why did the conflict happen? Any one main reason? No, of course we gave shelter or asylum to Dalai Lama, but main cause kya hai? What is the main underlying issue? Is the long-standing border dispute. Okay, so be it even in the western sector or in the eastern sector, there is a long pending border dispute which has not been demarcated or resolved. So, and there will be a lot of, one trigger point for that was, again India gave asylum to Dalai Lama. We will not go into the history part of it. Main thing is, first conflict was with respect to China. What happened in 65? Okay. And what happened in 1971? Yes, liberation of Bangladesh. Okay. All these three things happened in a very short span of time. Of course, after 1967, the political fragmentation will also start. Okay. So here, what India learnt, this was a decade of realism and recovery. What is idealism and realism? Idealism is thinking how world should be. Realism is how word is. Okay. And recovery, why? Because back to back there were so many confrontations. We had strained so many resources. So that was the main core issue in this space. We had to recover, right? And specifically 1971, because of all this happening, India will then sign a treaty of peace and friendship with. This will become a very core part of our dealings. Although this is later on criticized also. It is said that India says it is a part of NAM, but at the same time it was getting very close to USSR, right? And of course, India's reasons were very different, because they were nobody to our side. We were almost cornered in the continent. So because of our strategic compulsions, we had to do this. Now, from 71 to 91, again a couple of things why this is known as the greater regional assertion is because of, one is Pokhran 1 happened in this, and because of Pokhran 1, globally what happened was creation of the NSG group later on, and then the NPT treaty, which India never agreed to be a part of. So one is India again started its test, one is Pokhran 1, and post that we again worked on our economic development. So this is again an area where the different 5-year plans will come to fruition. Okay. So this is broadly what would happen here. And in this phase, initially there was a cold phase of Cold War, but again it will keep on oscillating. And exactly at 1989 to 1991, this will be a huge breakthrough. The disintegration of USSR would start. So two things will happen. 1991, formally it will break down, and 1991 again is the year when India will have its own LPG reforms, because India was almost at the cusp of a huge BOP crisis, balance of payment. Okay, so here fourth phase is very important, because a long trusted ally, we say that all weather friend, okay, has gotten disintegrated. Now India is forced to look outwards, and precisely this is where India would also start its, and notice right now the name is Look East. It is only after this it will become Act East. Okay. Second is against safeguarding our strategic autonomy. फिर से देखो इस term को, strategic autonomy. Now Cold War has ended here. The moment USSR would disintegrate, it would be regarded as the triumph of liberalism and capitalism, and bye-bye to socialism. Okay. So now India is again, of course, we have to open up, we have to look for new friends. So here we again were very cautious that we don't pick any specific sides, but we keep our options open. And secondly, just after this, now the question will always loom, is now NAM relevant? Because NAM was created in the backdrop of Cold War. Now if, according to conventional cells, if the Cold War is stopped, what should be the main outcome? Right? वो question हम आगे देखेंगे. We'll again explore specifically about NAM and its future. And this is also where the Pokhran 2 again would happen. Yes? Right? And the moment this would happen, India would again alienate US and even Japan because of these two tests. So this 98 specifically is a reminder of how the let's say bifurcation would happen here. Now when we move to the fifth phase, 1998 to 2003, there are many important events. I'll just mention the years, just remember them. One of the very important year is 2001, and specifically the 9/11 attacks. Okay, this will again put a huge dent on US. US always was, in fact, after the end of Cold War, it was believed to be word was unipolar. What is unipolar? There is only single power. What is a bipolar word of Cold War? There are two powers, right? So US hegemony, you know what the term hegemony? What is that? Dadagiri, okay? Or showing a lot of might, both in hard power sense, soft power sense. So this is going to get challenged. That is the one major thing that happened. 2001, 9/11 attacks, one. Second, especially during this time, India will double down on its reforms. And again, remember, there you will also have the dot-com bubble, etc. Right? But again, few years back, later, few issues will come. 2008, the world will face one of its worst financial crisis. This is the mortgage crisis, okay, the subprime crisis because of fall of Lehman Brothers. 2008 crisis hogi, but it is the same year where India will be able to get itself the civil nuclear deal, which is also known as the 1-2-3 agreement. Now, this is a very interesting part, especially in the fifth phase. Almost from India's independence to the fourth phase, India's relations with US and specifically India's defense relations with US were almost non-existent. And 2000 onwards, okay, there will be a huge change in our relations with USA now, right? To the extent that we were able to bargain this, and we were able to get the civil nuclear deal even without being a member of, right, the NSG, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, or even without signing the Non-Proliferation Treaty. So even that was there. So this is again something to be again talked about, and again this is where our fundamentals, that India was not much affected by what was exactly happening in global sphere, RBI and all our safeguards. Again, a lot of credit goes to the late Prime Minister Manmohan Singh for this. So there were a lot of reforms, and India was seen as a balancing power. Dekho, there are traditional hardcore powers, who are balancing powers? Okay, so again they are again increasing in stature, but they are still not big enough. They can help in or giving support to some other power, right? And please remember, even then and even now, India has never seen itself as ally of somebody. So ally agar शब्द kabhi bhi, we are never anybody's ally. We are partners, and by being partners we keep our options open. Okay, this is what was happening. Now the sixth phase is again mentioned to be as energetic engagement. What do you mean by energetic engagement here? More proactive, right? So for example, look east became act east. Similarly, although look west was there, but now you have more focus on west. What exactly happened in west? India is able to have very good relations with Israel, even with Palestine, the Arab countries, and even Iran. We have substantial investments in Iran. So even at, yes, Chabahar port, etc., and even at this critical juncture, India is able to mediate and at least have talks with all these players. This is one of very good example of strategic autonomy. I can give the same example for Russia, Ukraine also. That having good relations with both of them and having independent relations. So we are not hyphenating ourselves. That when we speak to Russia, we cannot speak to Ukraine. Right? So for that, I'll again tell you a word that is known as de-hyphenation. Right? अब अगर हमने अब energetic और कैसे है? Again, more proactive diaspora. In the recent years, there is a lot of focus on economic diplomacy. So India is getting a lot of FTAs, free trade agreements. Okay, a lot of defense deals. The focus is there. So when we say energetic part, that is the core part. That yes, there is a renewed focus on foreign policy. The means to achieve our old continuous objective are changing, right? Means are changing, but the ends are always same. Are we clear till here? ठीक है? अच्छा, how many of you have not got the handout yet? एक बार बस raise कर लो hands. अच्छा, just a second. गौरव? कितने कितने? तुमने बोल दिया? अच्छा, ठीक है. एक बार काउंट कर लो भी कितने यहाँ पे स्टूडेंट्स हैं. ठीक है. Okay. Are we clear? If we are clear till here, now if I pose a question to you, this is now very easy to solve. Continuity and changes in Indian foreign policy. And if they again change the question that what recent changes have happened in the Indian foreign policy, let's say in the last 10 years or so. If you already know this part of energetic engagement, can you write the points? अब बताओ, इसमें continuity क्या होना चाहिए? Whatever we saw as objectives of foreign policy, that will remain the same. Change क्या होगा? The means to do it. Yes or no? Right? अब change में I'm writing some points. I think most of you will be able to answer it. Change क्या हुआ है? बताओ. Starting number 1. चलो, for example, I'll give with examples. For example, look, East has become. Okay. What has non-alignment become? Multi-alignment. In fact, while doing this, our approach to strategic autonomy. So here, very two prominent examples. One example in even Middle East, and I can also talk about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So Middle East is again one of the best tests of Indian foreign policy, that India is able to have very good relations with all the major players, having substantial investment. In fact, that is also the case with Afghanistan. Afghanistan ke case mein the main challenge is that we have not given formal recognition to Taliban, but very recently we started to have talks. And in our handout we will also explore this, that why India changed its diplomatic stand. कि पहले we were not in the favor of having talks, but why are we having talks? Which that point tells you there is a lot of realism in our foreign policy. Here you can give the example of how India's talk with Taliban. The foreign policy has become, you see, more muscular foreign policy with more focus on deterrence. Again, you can again add here zero tolerance to terrorism, right? And we can give examples, right? The best example here is Operation Sindoor. Yes or no? This is muscular. Then I can talk about more focus to the diaspora. You can write Namaste Trump, Howdy Modi. All of these can be examples that there is renewed focus on diaspora, right? Other than that, any other changes that you witness in the foreign policy? I will talk in the economic domain also. So you have more FTAs, FDIs, investments. Now, even, for example, earlier Africa was said to be a dark continent. Why? It was often ignored. Now India has a renewed focus on Africa. Earlier, in Africa, only a couple of countries, right, from South Africa to the other rich nations were a focus. Now, this has changed. Similarly, our approach to Central Asian republics, there is now a renewed focus that you will see. We had started a Connect Central Asia policy in 2012, which has now become even more revamped. Right? LA is Latin America. Now, Latin America के लिए बहुत बार बोला जाता है out of sight and out of mind. Even this, in the recent few years, you will see a renewed focus on this. Okay? The handouts have started. You can just raise your hand so that he can identify whosoever needs it. See, meaning of strategic autonomy. देखो, चलो, इसको भी एक बार. Let's break down these two terms here. First of all, what is the meaning of the term strategic? See, this term, there are two terms here. One is strategic and one is tactical. Strategic means, first of all, it is long term, and embedded in this is the notion of security. For example, we will say long term, Abhiraj, long term security interests. Tactical is very short term. Isliye cricket maybe when you see a captain changing their field, these are tactical measures. But if the selectors are to select, what is that? Strategic. Kisko kab retire karna hai, kab nahi retire karna hai, yes or no? Okay, that is there. Other term is autonomy. What is autonomy? Let's say your own independence, freedom to conduct your own self affairs, right? So if you're living in your house versus if you're living outside, where you have more autonomy? Outside, ठीक है, कह सकते हैं. At the national level, when us, let's say, for example, if we know NATO. So there are many countries who are part of NATO, and because they are part of NATO, we know there is something known as collective security and collective defense. So if one country or one NATO member is attacked, all of them have to come together and save it. अब उसमें autonomy कहाँ रही आपकी? You are losing some part of your autonomy. So the more groups that you join specific, where there are hard binding obligations, that means your autonomy or your choice to have your own independent decision will get reduced. इसको आप, if you understand or more easy terms, think also sovereignty. Sovereignty means ability to exercise decisions in internal as well as external sphere, yes or no? So strategic autonomy, India exercised also during NAM movement, and even when I say post NAM, I am actually meaning to the historical part of it. क्योंकि जब भी मैं NAM बोलूंगा, NAM is of course a movement also, but NAM also is an idea. Both things. So which is why strategic autonomy remains a very core part of Indian foreign policy. Are we clear, people online? ठीक है? So in this question, this is again a question which will test you, right? Again, what is again a change? India is voice of the global south. Again, our focus on human relief. इसमें बहुत example as and when we'll go. For example, India gave $4 billion to Sri Lanka in 2022. At a time when nobody was helping Sri Lanka, even at a time when it was under a debt trap of China. India was the responder. Be it Maldives, be it Turkey. So India has been a first responder, number one. Second, voice of global south. A voice of global south को prove करने के लिए the best program that you can always quote is ITEC. Okay, what is ITEC? This is India Technical and Economic Cooperation, and this is present in all the countries where we have south-south cooperation. The biggest component of ITEC is in Africa, जहाँ पे आप पढ़ते हो related to education, related to health. So if you again think what changes have happened in Indian foreign policy, these are some of the changes that one comes to think about. You can leave some space, even more points as we move along. You will see what changes have happened in Indian foreign policy. Okay? FDI, foreign direct investments. FTAs. FTA में the recent example is the FTA with UK. Or economic में I can also give you a counter example also, that India is becoming more self-aware, so India moved out of RCEP, yes or no? तो वो भी लिख सकते हो. That shows that we are now not saying yes to everything. We are choosing our own priorities and interests and deciding accordingly. India moved out of RCEP. Yes, we can talk about. और अगर एक अलग से point हो सकता है that India, especially India's engagement in multilateral institutions, that has increased. In fact, India was presiding G20 in 2023, yes or no? So India was the president of G20. So in the recent times, you see a lot of engagement of India in, ये भी point अलग से लिख लो, नहीं तो multilateral institutions are important. Multilateral institutions में India again, there is a renewed focus for us to act. Okay? Now let's move. Now these 2 or 3 headings will again give you an entire snapshot of what is happening in the world. Okay? A lot of content again I have taken from the book Why Bharat Matters, The India Way, books by Shyam Saran. A lot of content is here. But main thing is exact snapshot सोचना है. Emerging word order. What is the emerging word order right now? Just one keyword, that is multipolarity. And because what is multipolarity? Multiple poles are there. अब इसमें first of all, who is the biggest player? US. But US authority is being challenged by and Russia both. In fact, the rise of China and Russia as number one authoritarian states and second as the states who follow socialism is always a threat to US. तो इसमें सिर्फ state की तरह मत देखो आप. This is also something known as the ideological war. Right? Other than that, then there is a rise of countries like, we can talk about India, right? There is a rise of other countries also. So, and other than that, US में specifically, we'll also write, याद रखना कुछ चीजें, MAGA, the tariff wars which US has again started, which is very unlike US because US always was of the plan to support the countries. And here what you are saying, USA retreating itself. Again in IR there is a theory wherein if a hegemon overstretches itself, they will always become weaker over a period of time. So for example, if you think of Vietnam, protracted wars in Afghanistan, again they did not gain much out of it. Of course, the whole reason became very unstable, and USA also had a lot to lose after they came out. But they thought that why it is better to come out of it. Okay? So when we say that emerging world order, first of all, it is multipolar, but at the same time we can say the world is in a state of flux. What is the meaning of flux here? Ever changing. There are no set patterns. Whatever you think is the set pattern will again get challenged. The word is constantly in a state of flux. So ना ही word bipolar है, ना ही unipolar है. It seems to be that the word appears to be multipolar. But even when I say multipolar, there are so many constraints on the word which you will see next. Now there is a huge list. What is happening? Like for example, USA's unilateralism under America's first policy, yes or no? Example जैसे भी क्या देखा हमने? Making America great again. Again, strict border policies. H1B visas, strict, they are becoming more strict. Okay. Influx of people, also all of that became more strict. What is that? That is America first policy. And it is not just US that is following it. Even in EU has shown now a dislike for a lot of people coming in. There is a lot of xenophobia, yes or no? So that is why all of us know about globalization, but there is globalization, at the same time there is also deglobalization going on, right? So there is also a retreat of people as opposed to only the people going in. One, there is a rebalancing of the global economy with the rise of China, with India, that we are seeing. Return of old empires, right? Resurgence of Russia, Iran, okay, and even Turkey. And there are protracted wars which are also going on. Russia, because it was rising, now Russia has been put in a very long conflict with Ukraine. On the Iran front, we already know that Iran has, in fact, you know what is JCPOA? Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was supposed to be related to their nuclear facilities, that they would agree to inspection by IEA, AEA, it would again be US, etc. All of them agreed to it. But then this JCPOA failed, right? Again, you can say Trump, and also how Iran regime could not come into close terms with it. So now what reaction that you are seeing right now, there is a lot of retaliation and escalation that is going on. In fact, if you see that how they were able to attack those nuclear sites from such a far distance, how the B-2 bombers, etc. actually went through. So this again has a potential to put the entire region into a full-blown clash. And only the days to come will show, right? ये तो कल की ही news है. तो Iran वाला topic and Israel, Iran are very hot topics. If they don't ask you in mains 100% detailed analysis, they will ask you in interview. Because again, these are emerging topics, right? Then, geopolitical flux overall in the Middle East. Ab Middle East mein, you have Syrian crisis in Afghanistan, reign of terrorism, for example, in Islamic State of Iraq. And I can again say the rise of, for example, religious fundamentalism, right? A good line to also talk about Africa as a continent, that which was called as a lost continent, is now being seen as a continent of hope, which is why I used the term earlier that it was seen as a dark continent, okay? That not much focus was there, but Africa is also, in fact, here you can just write, AU has become recently the part of even G20. There is also African Vision 2063, and we'll also see other financial trade agreements within Africa only. Then technology, connectivity, trade are now the new notions of power. इसमें बस एक कीवर्ड ऐड रखो, weaponization. You will see this term so many times. Weaponization of technology can happen, weaponization of connectivity, which means infrastructure, and weaponization of water, weaponization of trade, everything can happen. What is weaponization of trade? Trade and tariff wars, yes or no? And this is again a way by which nations show their power. When I use the term power, you know there is hard power, there is also soft power, right? These terms were coined by Joseph Nye, and he very recently passed away. What is hard power? देखो, hard power is the power of coercion. It is first of all military power, right? Second, it is also economic power. Up economic power, when I say hard power, if it is used in positive sense, you can have good trade relations. In negative sense, क्या होगा? Sanctions, embargoes, tariffs. That will be the negative side of hard power. Yes or no? What is soft power? Persuasion, influence. Any example of soft power in India? Yoga, Bollywood. Very recently we had the International Yoga Day also, 21st June. Bollywood, culture, cuisine, sports, all these things which are part of culture again happen to be. In fact, India's soft power is a very big element. In fact, जो हम बात करें ना continuity और change में, in the change part we can also highlight that how India has very much showcased its soft power in the last 10 odd years, very much, right? Which again has attracted a lot of diaspora and also a lot of foreign people to how India as a continent. Then, चलो आगे बढ़ते हैं. Climate change is a factor contributing to geopolitics. There is Arctic passage, इस पे भी underline करो. Because in IR, you can be asked question on this also. Somebody, your friend online was also talking about a question on WHO. I'm saying a question I directly on UNFCCC can also be asked. A question even on IMO. What is IMO? International Maritime, and वो आ भी चुका है. The question was something like the sea is the cosmos of the ocean, something or the word. I analyze this statement with respect to workings of IMO, International Maritime Organization, right? Dusra, I think 2 years back on climate change, there was a simple question on clean energy transition. Usme IR पूछा. All of us have read about environment, yes or no? अगर question clean energy का है और IR के perspective से है, just try to brainstorm what points can you think about. चलो ISA, France, Solar Alliance और कुछ. Question is on, let's say, clean energy transition. सबसे डायरेक्ट जो एब्सोल्यूट होना ही चाहिए. जस्ट एनर्जी ठीक है, इज अ पार्ट ऑफ क्या? यू हैव टू अगेन टॉक अबाउट UNFCCC, द रीसेंट COPs. वो कोर है पार्ट का. एंड इन दैट, फॉर एग्जांपल, व्हिच कंट्री वेरी फेमसली हैड वॉकड आउट ऑफ पेरिस क्लाइमेट डील? USA under Trump had walked out of it. So when the question comes in IR, you have to talk about politics of developed versus developing. Talk about CBDR, historical responsibilities. They are the ones who are emitters also, and they are the ones who are not trying to reduce the emissions. Right? Yes or no? Wahan pe politics of climate change will be a topic. So this topic has been asked 2 times in the recent 6 or 7 years. One on IMO, International Maritime Organization, and one on clean energy transition. How, what can, and in this, India has very good credentials. तो आपकी prelims की knowledge, mission life you have read about. Article 6 अभी न्यूज में था, अभी prelims पे पूछा गया आपसे, right? Right? Our net zero targets, Panchamrit, that is core part you have to write, but also write down the international politics around climate change. Okay? So which is why many a times when you think of IR, you generally would not think of environment wala part. But even that is important. ठीक है? Now, there are almost 14 topics I have written here. इसका फायदा क्या है? Even in GS3 में the moment you talk about external economy, what are the challenges? All these dimensions are going to be very handy for you. बहुत तरह के points है इसमें. Let me quickly go one by one. There is globalization. We know what is globalization. There is deglobalization. What is deglobalization? Protectionism. The rise of protectionism, even in very advanced economies. इसके लिए क्या हम कोट करेंगे? Oxfam report and the rising inequality. You can mention Gini coefficient to tell you this. Second, you can link this to, नहीं तो migration में लिखा होगा, चलो इसको मैं यहां से भी लिंक करूंगा बाद में. Okay. What is minilateralism? The rise of smaller groups. Okay, for example, if I say Quad has only 4 members. So earlier you have UN as a huge block. That is proper multilateralism. But now there is a rise of minilateralism. This also tells you that there is almost a kind of a dislike towards the existing old international order. Rise of minilateralism. Tariff issues se sirf yaad rakho. Tariff wars, right now between USA and China, this is a proper topic that we have taken. Clean energy transition, whatever we have discussed, later on just add to this. This is also main thing, isme what you need to know, developed versus developing, CBDR, etc., etc. Net zero targets, different for different countries, but even this is a challenge. Why? Because these emissions, for example, you know also CBAM by EU, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, etc. This we can talk about. Climate change as a whole theme is affecting the nations. We also have concept of climate refugees. With climate change, you have more increase of climate linked disasters. Yes or no? Even this is a challenge. There is technological transformation going on, like fourth industrial revolution, AI. Up from an IR perspective, again, this will also revolutionize modern warfare. Yes or no? Conventional warfare and modern warfare, how are they different? Use of tech, right? Surveillance, drones, integrate sensors, all of that. So now this has become very advanced. Yes, cyber warfare, even space warfare. These are the new frontiers, and technologically, if you know, you have agriculture sector, you have manufacturing sector, and you have service sector. All the three can be influenced by fourth industrial revolution. So nations who are technologically more powerful will be the superpowers of 21st century. ठीक? With this, इसी के नीचे लिखो ये essay का, this was a topic asked by UPSC in essay. One is that empire of future is empire of mind, and one future was technology as a determinant in international relations. ये essay का topic है. Technology, I think this is 2022 if I'm not wrong, or almost 2021. Technology as a determinant of international politics. Just 2 or 3 points if you are able to think on the spot. क्या सोचोगे इस पे? Technology as a determinant of international relations. चलो हर dimensions पे सोचो. चलो let me just quickly brainstorm. If I'm asking or saying technology as a determinant or a tool, for example, in foreign policy या IR, what can we think about? सबसे आसान तरीका क्या था? वॉट एवर वी हैड सीन इन ऑब्जेक्टिव्स, सब पे टेक्नोलॉजी ऐड कर लो, आराम से सोच सकते हो. एक आसान तरीका है. और सोचो, व्हाट इज अनदर वे टू थिंक? दैट इज वन इजी वे. नाउ फॉर एग्जांपल सिक्योरिंग, तो अगेन सिक्योरिटी के टर्म्स में दिस इज एवरीबडी स्पोक अबाउट in terms of warfare. Other, where else can technology be a determinant in international relations? Good point. Can anybody explain this point? Cultural immigration or migration. How would technology be a determinant in that? और कुछ? Flow of information is one. और कुछ सोचो. So this, in fact, technology can also fuel migration or movement of people, etc. Can this also be linked to? And when I say globalization, can I also link to global value chains, supply chains? Okay, I can, true. And all these things are impacted. अब आप सोचो. If the world is very much connected through tech, the same thing can also be disrupted, yes or no? So cyber security, vulnerability, how nations snoop, they do surveillance, all of that. In fact, we forgot one very important thing. Elections, for a democracy, elections are very important. And technology, for example, the famous Russian alleged interference in US elections in 2016, yes or no? So isme, the moment you are able to think, because for a nation, what is the most important thing? First of all, elections, and second, how it treats its people. So for example, if there are apps, so यहाँ पे data localization, even can that be a point? And even data sovereignty can also be a point in foreign policy, yes or no? So these are some points which again I would want you to think and stress, because again this being a very dynamic part, you will see a lot of questions here. The world is already under a lot of kinetic conflicts. कोई एक example बताओ. Sorry? Russia-Ukraine conflict, amongst many other conflicts going on. This again is a huge challenge going on, and इसको आप अलग से ऐसे भी लिख सकते हो. With the rise of non-state actors, Of course, non-state actors are everything which is not a state. It can also be NGO. But broadly, I'm talking for terrorism also, again, the rise of non-state actors, which is why it is very difficult to control. In terrorism also, you've heard in internal security terms like lone wolf attacks. Yes or no? इसीलिए वो भी बहुत मुश्किल है. That is why conventional notion of security is very difficult. कितनी tracking करोगे? At one time you're saying liberalize visa regimes, make borders open, flow of people, but the other time you can also have lone wolf attacks. Which is why globalization and deglobalization is a challenge, right? Okay, yeah, sleeper cells we can say. There are proxy wars. What are proxy wars? So nations, big nations don't directly fight, but they actually help somebody else fight. Okay? So again, for a very long time, US and USSR did not engage in conflict, but their allies, for example, used to be engaged in Middle East conflict, etc., etc. So this is going on. Can you tell me some of the proxies of Iran? So you have the 3H, the axis of evil. What are the 3H here? Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis. Just one example, the axis of resistance or the evil axis. There is again a lot of space warfare, militarization. This is also one dimension. Refugee and migration crisis. How does this affect international relations? One example is, for example, Rohingyas, but main thing is it will impact the demographic balance. Yes or no? It will also impact the safety, security of a region. Yes, resources, all this. So one just example, remember with Rohingyas. Okay, and whether you would allow them for principle of non-refoulement, suna humne? What is non-refoulement? That if they're coming from an area, you should not send them to the area where they are already being persecuted. Okay? Use these kind of terms in your answers. Weaponization of supply chains, for example. COVID-19 ke samay, what happened? The world was hugely dependent on China. And post that, what are we seeing? Diversification of supply chains. Yes or no? We have something known as Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. One of those initiatives. Plus, West-led world has a lot of alternatives to China's form of BRI. So, supply chains are getting a lot of overhaul. We don't want a lot of dependence on China in general. So, this is one example that you also see. Even for semiconductors, right? Ab usme bhi for whole China versus Taiwan, okay? Which again we'll see. And last is erosion of liberal international order. Where do you see erosion of liberal international order? Okay. Dekho, yes, the rise of protectionism. So liberal order, what it actually stood for, it is only going against it, right? So one is again respecting rights of people. So there is refugee crisis. Yes. Same for borders, saying open borders hai, but ab to borders close ho rahe hain. So refugee crisis ho gayi, closed borders hai. Second very important thing is a lot of failure of institutions. Can you give me example of institutions who have seemed to? WHO was criticized for failing for pandemic COVID-19. WTO has been stalled for a long time. DSB in WTO, dispute settlement body, right? Chalo SARC, but chalo more regional, but main is UN. I can even say NATO, etc. UN ke liye the biggest criticism of UN is, has it ever been able to stop wars? No. And the UN Charter, the UN Secretariat, the UN Security Council, General Assembly, all these are very old orders. They are not reflecting the real world of 21st century. So UN by its very nature is facing a lot of challenges. UN पे भी यही सवाल आता है. Should you abolish UN or should UN even exist or not? Which again shows you the failure of liberal international order. अगर आप याद करो वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री के टाइम पे League of Nations was created and after League of Nations we created UN. But almost a long time has happened and UN has not been successful in this case. And you can talk about other bodies, UNHRC. Suna hai naam? But UNHRC itself is said to be having members which don't respect the rights of people. Okay? Are we clear? ये सारे dimensions याद रखो. ये एक slide है. This will be very handy. And a lot of these points, as we grow country by country or issue by issue, a lot of these points will be very common. ठीक है? Now we will start with India's neighborhood. जो पहला पेज आपके लिए खाली छोड़ा है, this is a page intentionally left blank. So after we are done with India's neighborhood, okay, for each neighbor you have to just summarize what are the most important points that you know. Okay, जैसे हम एक बार करेंगे तो I'll also tell you how to do this. Now in India's neighborhood, a couple of things just for you to remember. देखो जिस भी region की हम बात करेंगे, talking of our policies, let's say if I write policies for neighborhood, what do we have? The neighborhood first policy. Second thing, for neighborhood, in countries we can also mention Gujarat doctrine. Okay, now Gujarat doctrine is famous for a keyword which often is used, non-reciprocity. कैसे यूज होगा? I'll also tell you. For example, even in case of Nepal or Maldives, those जो smaller neighbors हैं हमारे, first of all they have a big brother syndrome. What is big brother? Of course India is very mighty, so India is seen to be bossy and more in terms of interventionist, कि India interfere करता है. जैसे if I talk about Nepal, in Nepal you have Madheshis. 2015 में India of course took a stand for Madheshis, and India also said कि Madheshis के cause को to be added in the Nepali constitution, which was seen to be interventionist. Same also is seen by in case of Maldives also. Ab what this Gujarat doctrine says, and basically देखो neighborhood, we already know, can you change your friends? But can you change your neighbors? You cannot. So it is very important, number one, to have a stable neighborhood. Second, if India wants to be a global superpower, can we be a global superpower when the neighborhood is almost collapsing in front of us? Not really, right? So we need steps, active steps for better management of neighborhood, right? अब गुजरात डॉक्ट्रिन क्या बोलती है कि whatever steps you do it with non-reciprocity. It means it should not be reciprocal. What is reciprocal? Something that is transactional. You are doing a transaction. What is? जैसे Trump को बोला जाता है, Trump has a transactional approach, give and take, and he goes for a very hard bargains. A lot of things that he has done, for example, is only to exact something out. Okay, in fact, if you go about into the stalemate which actually happened between India and Pakistan, तो आप सोचो, he was able to strike a deal with both of them, and almost there, at least at the back doors, it would have been with some give and take. And the moment that happened, just before that, Pakistan was also able to get a IMF loan. In IMF, who has the biggest share? USA. So one thing is transactional. Gujarat doctrine says that go for non-reciprocity because this will help to create more goodwill. बाकी सारी चीजें गुजरात डॉक्ट्रिन की are almost the same, which any neighborhood policy will talk about, but it stands out for non-reciprocity. So for example, if you get a question that Maldives में हुआ था ना India out campaign, there is a lot of anti-India sentiment, and despite that India is putting money, protecting its investment, going for relief efforts. अगर उसको conclude करना हो, justify करना हो, तब हम use करेंगे that as per the Gujarat doctrine, India should continue to doing its developmental and relief work in the spirit of the Gujarat doctrine. So this is where this can be handy. Other than that, whenever you have a question on neighborhood, any neighbor, you have to link it how it is helpful in India's neighborhood first policy, yes or no? Second policy that you have is, which is have now become Act East. एक और चीज, कोई भी policy होगी, a policy will always have at least 3 elements. First element will be, and this is common to all these policies, strategic, economic, cultural. In very simple terms, we'll understand. Strategic means, first of all, security based, and strategic also is from the location point of view, right? So for example, in this case, Act East is for which region of the world? Let's say Southeast Asia. So we will have strategic, which means long-term cooperation. So you will have proper defense exercise. Yes or no? Ab defense exercise, maritime exercise, joint patrolling. And इसी में ही आपका vision of Indian Ocean आएगा. Yes or no? the safety and security of Indian Ocean. All of that is strategic, long-term, security-oriented. Then, economic mein, what will generally we talk about? Either FTAs, FDIs, investments, infrastructure, right? Cultural, people-to-people contact. So, for example, in many, now whenever we say importance of any region, so there are terms. So, for example, if I take any location, there's a neighborhood maybe. What is the framework we will follow generally for these countries? Very simple framework. Either I have given you a quote or any line which tells you about that whole country. Then we are just quickly going through its historical background. Now, after a point of time, this exercise will become very easy for you to understand. These are the broad heads. Entire document is structured in this manner. Okay? Which means you can understand the entire relation via some line or a quote which is explaining that what are the shared values between the two countries, how to talk about it. That is the introductory part. And in some cases, for example, in US-China tariff wars, I've started with a quote only. Right? When two elephants fight, it is the grass that shakes, etc. So, historical background is important. Why? Because what are, for example, the ancient civilizational linkages? इस पे hardly 1 or 2 lines are required, not more than this. Anything which corrects. For example, India-Nepal is known as Roti Beti ka Rishta. Okay? So there are some significant, and that is rooted in our shared history, shared culture. For example, we spoke about Iran. India, Iran have very close relations since ancient times. Yes or no? So you have to talk about this, will show the depth of our relation. Now, significance हम क्यों कर रहे हैं? After a period of time, ये आप automatically करोगे. What is the significance of any region? You have to put your fit in, let's say, you have to imagine yourself in the region. It means, number one, you have to see its location. Significance, location, think from it from a strategic point of view. If you can, think from an economic point of view, and even from a cultural point of view. This is more than enough. Even in 2024, you had a question on the geostrategic significance of Maldives for India's energy security. तो अगर वो नहीं भी पूछे हर एक लोकेशन के, after point of time, this is very easy and very repetitive. That your mind will be tuned. अच्छा Sri Lanka है, अच्छा it is there in the Indian Ocean, important for India's maritime security. Strategic, why? Because for Indian Ocean and its better relations. Economic कैसे? The fishermen, okay, the Tamil fishermen, etc. A lot of people again have their livelihoods. Cultural कैसे? Old historical bonds, religious bonds, cultural bonds. That is always the significance of a country. Fine. Cooperation is when you take this and bring in the current affair aspect and you bring in more dimensions. Cooperation, just think from a GS angle. Okay. Ab isme, for example, you have political cooperation. So I'm just opening these terms. Almost इसी तरह से we'll see this. Ab political में I'll talk about the high level visits, whether it has 2+2 dialogue, etc., etc. In political, I can also talk about multilateral. अब कहीं कहीं पे document में this is taken as a separate dimension, very easy to understand. What is multilateral? So for example, India and China, in which groups are they common? Any idea? SCO for example, right? Right, BRICS. अब वहां पे वो cooperate करते हैं. Second, whether they support India's UNSC seat, they oppose it or not, these are the points. एक बार ये framework का समझ लोगे, सारे points automatically flow होंगे. And for each country, I've also added all the minute facts of prelims in the document itself. So then going through the document will become very easy for us. But ये इसके पीछे की approach समझना जरूरी है, right? So political is one. अब इस पे I will keep on adding. Then अब I can either write security or I can write defense. अब इसमें if these countries have defense exercises, if they do joint patrolling, if they have shared vision again from let's say Indo-Pacific, all of that will be in this dimension. कोई डिफेंस की recent purchases हैं वो यहाँ पे आ जाएंगी. तो security and defense is one dimension that we'll explore, areas of cooperation. Then you have economic, and in many cases I've tried to add economic, but what would you add in economic? देखो सबसे पहले तो the trade numbers, if there's a deficit, surplus, we'll talk about it, right? Then अब इसमें I have taken many times connectivity separately, infrastructure. So there are some projects, for example, you know Kaladan, right? Between which countries? Kaladan, Myanmar, okay? That is a specific connectivity. When I say Central Asia, I'll again talk about something which was asked in prelims this year, INSTC, Ashgabat Agreement, etc. That is an example of connectivity. Even connectivity is very important, right? This is there. Then, इसके बाद there is a dimension of energy. Now it may happen that किसी country में सारे dimensions लिखने का scope ही नहीं होगा आंसर में. Then you have to pick and choose the best part. But this is where you have to know. बहुत बार क्या होता है क्वेश्चन आ जाए broad 15 marks का, and then it is very difficult to open and write it. Yes, energy. अब energy में you will write about hydropower, nuclear. Yes or no? What is hydropower? So there are many countries. India, Bangladesh share a lot of rivers. India, Nepal share a lot of rivers. India, Pakistan, India, China. So from that, hydropower cooperation can happen. And with energy, you will also think about nuclear part also, right? I can again add area, either technology or science and tech. ISRO's cooperation, for example, if I say France, right? So ISRO is again collaborating in technology, in science and tech. There is a lot of innovation, even in green energy, innovation is happening here. So polity, security, economy, connectivity, energy, technology, okay? And other than that, for many countries in the neighborhood and even outside, what India is doing a lot of is either we can say development, relief or aid. So India, for example, says that we are the first responder to any crisis in the Indian Ocean, right? So India has had in COVID-19, okay, in many, you know what are HADR? Human assistance. Yes, okay, so disaster relief operations are there. So India is also cooperating in that. So in Indian Ocean, so there are a lot of areas of cooperation between any two countries. Okay? And this format you will see again and again. Then you have challenges. So I'll tell you first a common list of challenges which generally you will see in India. Okay? जैसे कि ये आपने देख लिया था इससे पहले वाला. Now when I say challenges in India, or when India or any country, in the neighborhood, one challenge will always be automatic. The rise of China. Okay? So China's investments in that region were increasing. Its debt trap. So China is a challenge. Other challenge in many cases is the political structure. For example, if I talk about Bangladesh, or even Nepal, or even Maldives, many times pro-India government comes, many times pro-China government comes. So even the political structure can be a challenge for having goodwill, managing perceptions. Yes. Other challenge can be, especially when you are sharing borders, and when I say borders, think about both land and maritime. Ab borders में there will be very common points always. जैसे कि illegal trafficking, human trafficking, arms, drugs. Other than that, again, you can talk about cattle smuggling, okay? Okay, illegal migration I've just mentioned here only. Okay, and again, with borders, many times what happens, a lot of insurgent groups keep on moving here and there. So insurgent groups I can also talk about. Yes, the insurgent groups. So borders is always a challenge. Second is India is always criticized because of this. So here it is said, India promises but China delivers. So we have proposed so many projects. There are projects which are lying for almost 10-15 years, but still they have not been done. In many cases because of a lot of file work going on. Of course also because of red tape, changes in government and changes in terms. And many times in stalled projects में कौन आ जाता है फिर? Even this can be there. This is again a common feature, which is why for many of these things, when you write the way forward, you have to talk about how to counter this. Okay? Other than that, again, we can talk about how diversification can happen. I'll explain to you this point. In many cases, when India has hydropower corporation, even Bhutan, by the way, which is very close to us, even they feel that it is very much in favor of India, right? So when I say diversification, you should open more avenues, right? So it is not just maybe IT sector, okay, gems, jewelry, jute, cotton, stove, whatever is there, open up this sector so that it should not appear it is India's only dominating in one particular part, right? So these are generally the challenges, okay? Of course, diversification is the solution only. I should have written here, okay, one-sided nature of trade, etc. Or I should say that trade is heavily tilted in India's favor. These are the common challenges you will see across the neighbors, right? If this is clear to you, then the most asked question is how to think of a way forward. क्या way forward में हम 3-4 points लिखें? या how to think about it, okay? So here, I will tell you a structured approach. And this you can use across countries. First thing is, see what is the dimension. So first from a, and when I say political, I also mean diplomatic angle, right? अब इसमें भी there is a hierarchy. अब depending on what question is there, first of all, I'll tell you what are the options you have. Depending on the question, we will use that option, right? अब ideally, what should be a way forward between a country? You should talk it out, right? So there is already any institutional dialogue mechanism, yes or no? वहां पे हम बात कर सकते हैं. But if this is not working, जैसे institutional dialogue mechanism, do we have it for our borders with China? नहीं, between country to country. So you have SR, the meetings of special representatives, and there is also a dialogue mechanism specially for border resolution. So you should use institutional or dialogue mechanism specifically for a purpose if it is there. ठीक है? अगर ये नहीं हो पा रहा है, for example, even in case of countries like abhi right now, Bangladesh is in crisis, right? Mohammad Yunus is the caretaker and is again making many anti-India statements. In those cases, when the government is not there or there are some challenges, then you can propose steps like track 1.5 or track 2 diplomacy. Track 1 diplomacy is diplomacy between the officials of the government. 1.5 is again, you will also engage through the non-official channel. Track 2 is between, sorry, track 2. To track 2 mein there will be no government part, but it is almost like a people to people, right? Retired bureaucrats will also act. So these are the terms of political diplomatic mein, what we are trying to say. These are some things you can talk about. You can also have a 2+2 in the institutional part. This is one way to resolve it, okay? Third is when you take this political part to the international level through other institutions. This is what India is doing in case of Pakistan. What are we doing in this case? Batao. Again, naming and shaming, raising a lot of voice at UN, at other forums, yes or no? So there is again, so we are doing the institutional country to country level talks. If it is there, track 1.5, track 2. But if this is not working, you then take it to different avenues. जैसे कि SCO, in SCO, India-China relations got better. Yes, this is how you have to write and talk about it. ये समझ में आ रहा है? हाँ हाँ बिल्कुल बिल्कुल वो again, but that is also for let's say a lot of public perception that people get to know. You can definitely write it that for our operations and what we exactly wanted to attend, this is the way to talk about it. So this is one. So there is political or diplomatic level. Then this overall diversification is what I had just told you. This is basically from an economic angle, right? That, for example, in Russia, the relation is always viewed from the angle of defense, yes or no? So what do we want to do? We want to have more multi-layered cooperation with Russia. How would you have it? More diversified. तो अब यहाँ पे you can have it more multi-layered. अब ये this framework can be used across countries. How you think about them? फिर आपको specific points मिलेंगे. And these are ways to think. Otherwise, for some countries, I also have specific points as way forward. What can be done? What approach can be used? Okay. So multi-layered cooperation can be there, right? Then newer avenues can be explored. Then one is, ये point हमेशा ही रहेगा अपना. People to people or cultural, right? This has a lot of potential, and for every country this can be a point. Even if you think there are a lot of people of India in that country, even then people to people ties can be improved. How? Send more students, okay, engineers or doctors, or have student exchange programs, okay. Again here, for example, I'm just using the word Bollywood yoga, but you can substitute. More cultural exchange programs, yes, tourism, etc. So main is more people to people ties. In fact, even for India, Russia, and even for India, US, if we want to take the relationship even to a more advanced level, we can again talk about better people to people talks, okay. So these points will be there. Fourth point, I'm just writing specific, is that for each country I would have then mentioned a more specific point that can also be explored. जैसे कि जो challenges हैं, based on the challenges, one will be faster execution of projects, for example, right? Then India, अब जैसे execution of projects हो सकता है. In many questions, we'll again link it to whether the countries can converge on shared objectives like Indo-Pacific, okay, and shared areas of cooperation. Generally, this will be a way forward across dimensions if you want to think about, which is why again a lot of questions जो भी हैं हमने इसी तरह से structure करे हैं. But for irritants, जैसे कि let's say India and Pakistan, if there are issues, be it with Indus Water Treaty, पहले भी बोला गया था that blood and water cannot flow together, right? Even now there is a stalemate between the Indus Water Treaty. So then for that you have very specific that India has put something known as conditional bilateralism. That until and unless, for example, Pakistan takes credible actions and brings people to their books and places, India is not going to budge. So वहाँ पे India has had a very strong approach, and there you have to exactly go by the government's approach, right? That what exactly is the way, that why talk is not happening, what is the reason, and what India is saying. For example, this time in very clear terms, the words that were used, that war cannot be tolerated, there should be no nuclear blackmail, okay. So all these specific terms, जैसे वो मैंने मतलब I've also added in the India Pakistan, so this will make your document very current oriented also. Are we clear on this? ठीक है. तो अगर हमें challenges, areas of cooperation, all of this, if this is clear to you, then most of the part of bilateral cooperation across countries will be very thorough in your mind. The only defining factor then is whatever you've read in prelims, if you're able to again recollect and put it to paper. On that front also I've made your job easy. हर एक टॉपिक पे जो भी मेन कीवर्ड्स हैं वो हमने इसी पे डॉक्यूमेंट में ही ऐड कर रखे हैं, राइट? ठीक है. पीपल ऑनलाइन फॉलोइंग टिल हियर? Okay, now let's start with India, China, and now you'll see this whole format getting repeated. Now, few months back, the relations between India and China were not that great. but especially after the recent summit of SCO, now the relations are in a better place. Why? Because there is some agreement on how to resolve the border disputes, number one. Second, there is more active talk that is going on. Second, with the rising tensions between USA and China, India also sees this as a space for India to maneuver in the region. Okay. Now, when I talk about India and China, there is again a historical mistrust. We already know the history that India started with the Panchsheel agreement, but ended up paying the price of 1962. Yes or no? So here, I'll go quickly. I'll tell you India, China. अच्छा यहाँ पे एक just keyword add कर लो. This was again highlighted. The elephant dragon tango. Though during the recent meet, this term was mentioned that now is the time for elephant dragon tango. Who is the dragon here? China. Who is the elephant? India. And what is the meaning of tango? Dance. This is almost symbolic of the Asian century. The idea of Asian century is what? That countries of Asia, like countries like China, India, Japan, they will come up and they will collaborate and help in a better world order. Okay? So isko आप end में जरूर लिखना. In fact, in the conclusion also, the exact line I have also tried to mention, elephant dragon tango. Now, here in the introduction, these are very complex bilateral relations, as we have seen and as we will see. Ancient civilizational links हैं, right? You remember the Silk Route? But it is challenged by strategic rivalries, and these rivalries are spread across various domains. Right? Then, Shiv Shankar Menon, Asia rise hinges on India and China learning to rise together, not apart. This also tells you why elephant dragon tango or why Asian century is very important. Asian century mein if India and China continue to fight, then it will be very difficult for the rise of Asia, right? So former the NSA, Shiv Shankar Menon, in his book also, Strategic Choices, mentions this particular part, that how India and China can find ways to cooperate. Now, historical relations, just a couple of points. Isko to jaldi you have to quickly go through this. For example, what is PRC? People's Republic of China was recognized by India. This is important. The Panchsheel Agreement was one of the core features in the initial part, right? Civilizational links, Xinjiang, okay, Bodhidharma. In fact, Tagore's 1924 visit, all of that shows how closely connected India and China were, right? Even very recent seminar also highlighted their shared heritage. All of that is fine. This is one. Now, I would also tell you there are areas in the recent times where India and China's interests are converging. Normally, we only talk about India-China divergence, but there is also convergence of India and China, right? So, इसमें पहले तो headings है. These are the heads where they are converging, and then we will have a look at it one by one. Now, there is a huge economic interdependence. Despite the fact that you know that India actually went for ban of Chinese apps. In fact, the same thing is also true with US and China. I'll also tell you all the facts of US and China, I think in 3 or 4 slides. India case में there is a huge dependence. Now, we can see it from the point here. Volume of trade is high. China is the top import source. Between India and China, who has a, let's say, surplus and who has a deficit? China is surplus, this we know. Major imports, what is API here? Active pharmaceutical ingredients. Electronics, exports mein kya hai? Iron ore, etc. And main thing is, a lot of, see, we import so much of, let's say, goods from China. In fact, India mein maximum cheeze China se leke assemble karte hain, right? There is again a very popular person who is in Shark Tank who produces some appliances, who calls it Indian, but he never says that he actually imports all of this from China. And he's not the only one. There are so many, lot of white labeling of goods that is going on, right? So in that sense, it is a huge part. Second, Chinese, in fact, इंडिया की जो मार्केट है अबाउट दीज मोबाइल फोन्स, it is more than almost 40 or 45% is dominated by China, more than that, right? China's FDI in startups is also very high, right? So this is again, in fact, if you know the Paytm Bank's controversy, and again even with Flipkart, etc., the issue is that there's a lot of Chinese FDI coming in. While this is convergence for us, in the very next slide we'll also see what is the issue because of this. ठीक है? Now there is, अब देखो, अभी we are seeing this from what are the areas of complementarity between them. Cultural exchange, अब Ayurveda है, yoga, okay, you can also write this Sova Rigpa. Okay, other traditional Chinese medicine, etc., having a lot of commonality from India's Himalayan states. Now, resumption of direct flights with this Kailash, Mansarovar also. Some of these, ab isme you don't have to remember all the examples, all you have to remember is at least one example in each, if you have to substantiate that what are the areas of cooperation between India and China. Now, multilateral forums mein, first of all, coordination in BRICS, yes or no? BRICS is important, even in SCO, even for example other areas, and even AIIB. What is NDB? New Development Bank, created out of BRICS. And when we discuss BRICS, I'll also tell you that BRICS wanted to create a new currency, the BRICS currency. And the moment they actually wanted to moot that idea, Trump came out with a very strong tweet that the moment you create a new BRICS currency, which is again, they were thinking about de-dollarization, yes or no? That de-dollarization would be penalized because US cannot see a hegemony, its hegemony decline. So यहाँ पे BRICS currency is an idea, and when I say BRICS currency, the theme of that is Easternization of global finance. अभी तक जो पूरा global finance है, that is West led. If you want to take money either from World Bank or IMF, you have to agree to their terms and conditions. And many times their terms and conditions are very much specific and very much US specific, right? So which is why BRICS countries want to create an alternative. But this is also getting a lot of resistance from countries like USA. एक और issue है, BRICS has recently expanded, becoming BRICS Plus. The moment it has becoming BRIC Plus, it is also getting a lot of criticism. That new non-democratic countries are even added to BRICS. That is also a challenge. Okay, fine. Ab main jo patch up hua between both these countries actually happened in the Kazan summit of BRICS. Right? So of course they collaborate here, but here also they both of them made a pitch for global South equity, South-South cooperation. Then on climate and development front, similar stands in UNFCCC, which is where you will see developed and developing countries collaborating. In fact, I can say they have a similar stance in WTO also, right? So development mein you can even add WTO here, and with WTO you would also remember, apne economy mein padhoge nahi to aage, the Doha development agenda that is pending since almost the last 20 odd years. The developed versus developing country are fighting on WTO, especially on agriculture, on subsidies. There is also the fight for de minimis level, right? But wo chalo, that is a topic of GS3, more detail mein aap dekh sakte ho. Now there is a support for ISA. ISA here is International Solar Alliance. So this link this to clean energy transition. Okay, energy transition finance. There is also collaboration in UN peacekeeping, health, disaster relief. ये सब देख के लग रहा होगा कि दोस्ती बहुत अच्छी है दोनों कंट्रीज में, राइट? बट दैट इज नॉट द केस, बिकॉज व्हेन इट कम टू challenges, the challenges are far multi-layered that will outweigh all of this dosti. And in this friendship, many points are very new. And why it started to happen is because of this border management dialogue. Okay? So here there are, SR is here, the special representatives group, okay? And there are other monitoring groups. Their talks happened here, and which led to consensus on further disengagement. Main thing ye hai, and this is an update of March 2025, that on borders, which again had a lot of issue, राइट, चाहे मैं ईस्टर्न बॉर्डर्स की बात करूं चाहे मैं वेस्टर्न बॉर्डर्स की बात करूं, मेन थिंग इज दैट स्पेसिफिकली confidence building zones or buffer zones were created in Gogra, Pangong So, and even Galwan. This is a step in the right direction. So दो चीजें at least in the positive trajectory has happened between India and China. One of them is confidence building and resumption of border management dialogue. जो areas already they were disputed, on that front good action has been taken, number one. And second, they have started to collaborate during this BRICS Kazan summit, which again is a step in the right direction. Otherwise, before this, this was the most unresolved part. The border management dialogue was not in fact happening at all. Okay? This is, the full form, just a second, इसका full form बता रहा हूँ आपको. In fact, I am not able to recall that. It is a working mechanism for consultation and coordination. It is a working mechanism for consultation and coordination. SR is the special representatives. Okay? Now, this is the most important slide. India, China current issues, and in just one part, we've tried to club a lot of issues that are being faced. सबसे पहले, border issues. Border dialogue has happened, but still the big issue is unresolved LAC. What is LAC? Line of actual control. LOC is with Pakistan, LAC is with China, right? The Galwan clash, again, is there in the memory. And China's dual use of borders. What is the meaning of dual use? Yes. So China does the development of villages at one end, and this same thing can also be militarized. इसी पे एक चीज लिखो. This question was by the way asked in GS3 paper internal security. The question asked you about vibrant village program. This is India's counter to Chinese dual use of borders. That India is now also developing its villages. The name of the program is Vibrant Village Program. ठीक है? Second now, Belt and Road. यहाँ पे पहले तो लिखो, it started in 2013, now 10 years plus. So there's a very high chance of a question on Belt, BRI, or its allied topics पे पूछा जाए आपसे. Now, Belt and Road Initiative. What is it? It's a infrastructure development project, right? Now, if it is an infrastructure development project, what is the problem with that? क्या problem है हमें? One by one. पहला, one of the component of this CPEC, China Pakistan Economic Corridor. CPEC connects what to what? Right? Gwadar port कहां पे है? So Gwadar port is connected to Kashgar in Xinjiang. This is what is happening in CPC. And this actually goes through POK, that is the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, which is causing problems, right? Now, what is the issue also here? पहली चीज क्या है? Violation of India's sovereignty, territorial integrity, पहला issue. अब दूसरा आ जाओ, string of pearls. This is also known as strategic encirclement. Right? So for example, this is India. Around India, you have Sri Lanka, right? You have, for example, even Bangladesh, you have Nepal, you have Maldives, you have other countries. So China was wanting to create something which the experts say as a string of pearls, which can then be militarized and will put India into problem. Yes? अब जैसे कि ग्वादार में ports है. Where is this Hambantota port? Sri Lanka. Now, this is not the only issue, by the way. Another issue In BRI, if you have space, you write down debt trap. Debt trap. What is the issue with debt trap? For example, China, first of all, will do a lot of infrastructure projects. Then it will not allow you to have your own manpower. Chinese manpower will be there, so it will not create local employment. It will create a lot of unrest. Now with debt trap, the issue is, even with Sri Lanka we have seen the debt trap, even with Myanmar we have seen it, even with Nepal we are seeing it, with Maldives we are seeing it, and of course with Pakistan we are seeing it. That the biggest component of Pakistan's debt is Chinese debt trap. Okay? And what is the issue? अगर कोई भी country debt trap में है, problem क्या है बताओ? First of all, if there is debt trap, they cannot have good development. Their own resentment will rise in the domestic sphere, right? And again, for example, a lot of these ports are leased. These are loans, these are not grants. So eventually you have to pay a price, and that price can be very huge price. Same BRI when it goes through Africa, yahi same problem hai Africa mein bhi. Which is why India and Japan have AAGC, Asia Africa Growth Corridor, to counter BRI. Okay, abhi main likhunga steps to counter BRI alag se, that is there. The second or third point now is economic imbalance. Almost huge deficit we have, $85 billion trade deficit. API pe dependence, electronics dependence with China, right? To counter this, what are we doing? Diversifying the supply chains. We also have Atmanirbhar Bharat, PLI, the production linked incentive schemes, all of that we are trying to do. Then there are also water conflicts. You can think of weaponization of water as well. Now new dams are being created on river Brahmaputra between China and India, which is upper riparian, which is lower riparian. Upper riparian is China. अब upper और lower में आप बताओ who has more advantage? Upper riparian. Think of potential energy, rho GH. जिसके पास height ज़्यादा है, they will always have the advantage, right? So here there are dams that are being created, and across all these जहाँ पे भी river water sharing हो रही है, हर जगह ये point common है, lack of water sharing treaty. This is also an issue even with Bangladesh. आप कहोगे नहीं सर बांग्लादेश में तो गंगा के लिए और एक रिवर के लिए, बट गंगा वहां पे out of 54 rivers we only have 2 treaties, right? Same also issue with Nepal, same also issue with Bhutan. Lack of water sharing treaty and also lack of sharing of hydrological data. ये share ही नहीं होता. Hydrological data is not shared. Next, China's assertiveness in Indo-Pacific. How many of us know about this 9 dash line? 9 has become 10, then it became 11. And which islands come to your mind? Scarborough Shoal, Spratly Islands, Paracel Islands, and these are all disputed. China claims them to be their own. किस किस के साथ dispute है? किस किस country के साथ? Philippines, Vietnam, and also नहीं Japan में तो चलो और ऊपर चला जाएगा. You also have this issue in South China Sea also. You also have the issue in East China Sea also. So they are fighting also with Japan. Okay, they are also fighting with other countries of the Indian Ocean. So this is an issue. Assertiveness. Why is assertiveness? वो तो अपने में fight कर रहे हैं. हमें क्या दिक्कत है? सोचो. ठीक है. और कुछ? First thing is, of course, we are very close to ASEAN countries. Second, bhai, water, Indian Ocean is our sphere of influence. So if something is happening, if China is putting a lot of its naval ships, a lot of military, it also affects us. Second, if Chinese investment also happens in these regions will again become more tilted to China. So India ke liye it really matters. The assertiveness is in Indo-Pacific. Okay, so remember that also. Then strategic nexus, nuclear military cooperation with Pakistan. We recently saw the Chinese missiles etc. being closely used, even the missiles or drones of Turkey etc. और यहाँ पे just you can write down the policy of a two-front war. Support for terror proxies also is seen. You know the two front, one front let's say being Pakistan, the other front being China, which also increases the security calculations for India. Technology leverage, अच्छा मैंने तो कम बोल रहा था, 75% smartphone market is Chinese. There is risk to India's electric vehicles, 5G, semiconductors, and even there are cyber security threats. Any example that comes to mind which emanates from Chinese hackers? In Mumbai, okay. Yes, in the electricity grid failure which happened in Maharashtra was caused by Chinese hacker. That is just one example. Many times, yes, AIMS data leak, and there are many examples of state-sponsored or even you can say non-state-sponsored attacks. So cyber security again is an issue. Last wala issue that you will see is again linked to multilateral part. How China blocks India's NSG membership and UNSC seat. Yes or no? यहाँ पे in the border just write on one more keyword. Salami slicing लिख लो. यहाँ पे एक one thing also you can write China's five-finger policy. What is salami slicing? So again, one step at a time, they would want to take some part, then some part, then some part, then some part. This is their own idea of capturing and always creating tensions around border areas. That is the idea of salami slicing. These terms now are also used. And don't be afraid, ये terms आप GS में भी use कर सकते हो. The problem with opening the comment section is then students then कुछ और ही tangent में बात करने लग जाते हैं. Otherwise, if this happens, bhai, please focus on the class. I would then otherwise have to turn off the comment section if you guys are not focusing. Okay. Now, salami slicing, you know, what is China's five-finger policy? So that again, it is about China's assertive and again territorial claims. So right from India's western part to the eastern part, everything they say is a part of their own territory. They also say Tibet is their part, Arunachal, yes, all this is a part of China's five-finger policy. So whenever you write about China's territorial ambitions on the borders, use this term China's five-finger policy. Right, so India के जो भी bordering states हैं, which border with China, China claims them to be their own. With Arunachal, I can even add issues like, well, you know, the stapling of visas of Arunachal Pradesh. Again, they will do that. They will again keep on changing the map. In their map, they will also always say Arunachal Pradesh to be their own part. They have even modified BRI ka map to show that India is a part also. India has also joined BRI. So they will continuously do this kind of tactics. They also taught this to Nepal, which is why Nepal also modified. Of course, this is only alleged, right? That Nepal was doing at somebody's behest. Okay? So broadly, these are the major issues that India and China face. Now, I think this is not very clear. आप लोग को नहीं तो refer you. This is slightly blurred here. Now, reasons for unresolved border disputes. Of course, the Chinese tactics include salami slicing, always playing with the minds. The borders are undemarcated. Is this a British problem? Yes, this is a British problem. You have again a lot of lines because these lines are created by men. So you have, for example, the McDonald line. Right. In this case, you also have this McMahon line. And these, both the sides have different perceptions. So for example, after a period of time, it is very difficult to have agreement on these terms. So borders in many cases, in fact, kahin kahin pe to line bani hai, but in some cases, even the borders are not demarcated at all, which is again a challenge. Now, a specific case is made of the Shimla Agreement of 1914. Here, just ye yaad rakhna, China says that this agreement was signed between Britishers and Tibet does not represent the views of China, as simple as that. So what they are saying, that whatever agreement was signed was not signed between China or the true representatives of China. Second, it is also historically inaccurate to have signed it with non-representatives, इसलिए हम इसको मानते ही नहीं है, which also is again a point of a dispute, that they do not see how Tibet could be representing the will of China. That is the main core argument here. So because of this also there is unresolved border dispute and lack of mutual trust, especially if you see post Panchsheel. See, when we had Panchsheel, you know, Hindi Chini bhai bhai, but very shortly, few years later, what would happen? Okay, there will be bloodshed, there will be war, proper war that will happen here. So now there is a lot of mistrust, number one. Second, and there will always be an issue between Aksai Chin and the parts of Arunachal, and where both the sides will always have differing claims. Okay, so this again is something which is unresolved. Of course, in the very recent times, which is what is mentioned here, border management dialogue mein, that there is some progress, but this is not final progress. Both sides have not finally agreed. It is just that dialogue शुरू हुआ है बहुत time के बाद. Okay, so that is one major part here, number one. Now another small heading out of the topics that you have seen is India's concerns with BRI. I think all these points now you should know. ठीक है, यहाँ पे एक छोटी सी mini heading लिखो, alternatives to Chinese BRI. Many of this you would have done in your current affairs. So number one, for example, I mentioned the example of India and Japan. They collaborate in Africa to counter Chinese BRI via Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. And all these initiatives we are telling you, all these are infrastructure based projects. Now Blue Dot Network is not a project, but it is a certifying project. It will certify all the infrastructure related projects. And it will again point out the problems with, for example, BRI would have. Okay. IPEF is broadly under the contours of Indo-Pacific. Now G7 started with something known as, no, Golden Glebe is of EU. This I am telling you. पहले नाम था इसका B3W. Build Back Better word. Now the name is Partnership for Growth of Investment and Infrastructure. This is also an alternative to Chinese BRI, and a sub-component of this, which was launched in 2023 summit of G20, which India chaired. A sub-component of this is IMEC, India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor, which is also an infrastructure project. But part किसका है? PGIA का. PGIA is also there to counter Chinese BRI. So to counter Chinese BRI, these are the most important projects. That is what you need to know. Necklace of diamonds we can say, which is there, but that is directly to, चलो अलग से लिखते हैं, but it is not a very, नहीं, string of pulse का counter है वो, and string of pulse is a part of, or it is embedded part of BRI only. हाँ, directly नहीं, but बोलते हैं there are necklace of diamonds etc. But this is not an official Indian strategy. This is again what experts claim it to be. Second, it is a project, infrastructure project led by EU, Global Gateway. All these are infrastructure. देखो ये एक rating करते हैं. This is for rating of infrastructure projects. These are proper infrastructure projects wherein you will have proper road lines, rail lines, digital connectivity, everything. Same issue is also there with this. The Global Gateway is a proper, huge infrastructure connectivity project. But main क्या है? It is a counter or it is an alternative to Chinese BRI. Right? और भी मतलब after BRI again later on if you say you can also add SCRI, supply chain resilience infrastructure etc. यहां तक समझ में आ रहा है? अब now this is only I think some part we've already seen. Especially in the recent few months, there have been certain reset. The summary of that is mentioned here. Just go through it. This is a part of again current. The 23rd level, this SR is the special representative dialogues happened. It discussed border protocols. Then Modi-Z BRICS meet which happened in Kazan. This was the first formal meet since 5 years. Hence, it is a big landmark. And it is where this was said that South-South cooperation and India-China cooperation can be the future. Right? Depsang, Demchok, yahan pe breakthrough hue hain on the border front. So this 23rd SR level and again the WMCC have been instrumental in this. तो अगर क्वेश्चन आएगा या तो हमने कन्वर्जेंस पे लिखा हुआ है उसको, नहीं तो if you can also mention it like this. Okay? Now, hydrological data sharing, which was again not happening, now has been resumed for Brahmaputra, and the Kailash Yatra, this has gotten a green light. All these are steps in the right direction. Launch of joint academic exchange and revival of language scholarship. This is again a part of cultural diplomacy. So this particular section ka, the main thing to tell you is that this is the major change that has happened in the recent times, which again signals to you reset signals. Otherwise, हम elephant और dragon tango की बात नहीं कर रहे होते. We would have then talked about compete, contain, okay? Is this fine? This is again a part you can read here. अब इसको देखो, जैसे हमने देखा था, way forward. Again, in the way forward, first just see the dimensions. Diplomatic, border management, economic, at the regional level what we can do, at cultural level what we can do. And then finally we end with the idea of dragon elephant. So isme for each point there are multiple subpoints. You would not have the time to write all of them. This is again for your reference only. अगर इस सब में हमें एक point भी समझ में आ जाता है, because see, diplomatic, if you just write the diplomatic measures would help, this will not add much value. So you should add some points, but I am pretty sure you will not be able to write all of them. Okay? So यहाँ पे I'll just quickly go through them. Have better institutionalized SR level talks, better mechanisms, hotlines, resume, suspended forums like defense secretary dialogue, promote crisis de-escalation protocols. There were जैसे LAC incident जैसे हुआ, again if we can have simulation exercises to de-escalate it, this can be done on the diplomatic level. What is diplomacy in one line? The art of preventing war. Yes or no? Of course we can talk about dialogue, better trust, better communication, but idea क्या है? Diplomacy is whatever sweet talk you can do so that you don't have to fight war. ठीक है? On border management, fast track infrastructure, strategic roads है, advanced landing grounds, surveillance. अब देखो, this idea, first question is, if things are happening well with India, China, should India have an idealistic approach or a realistic approach? Realistic approach. So the very first point says that even though things are going on better, India should again have very strong security measures. Right? And even though CBM, you know what is confidence building measures, right? CBM. First point यहाँ पे bracket में लिखना, this is a realistic or realist approach, which says that we will have communication, but not at the cost of security. Communication है, बातचीत सब चलती रहेगी, but we have to be very pragmatic. The reason is historical mistrust. Then you can implement buffer zones, demilitarization zones, friction points, be it Galwan, Depsang. यहाँ पे major breakthrough है, but we can create some buffer zones to bring more clarity on both sides. Same cheese on the realistic front, prepare for high altitude combat preparedness. तो चाहे predator drones हो, इनमें से just idea is that even though diplomatic talks are happening, your security should not take a back seat. This same thing we are also doing with Bangladesh, with all the other neighbors, including Pakistan. Even now, if there is a stalemate, but that does not mean we'll take a back seat. This again shows to you a more pragmatic approach in Indian foreign policy. इकोनॉमिक फ्रंट पे बस ये चीज अपने आंसर में, अगर चाइना का क्वेश्चन है ये जरूर लिख के आना कीवर्ड, चाइना +1 strategy. What is China +1? Create an alternative of China. So one, of course, we have alternatives of BRI, but we'll also create alternative of China. And here India has a huge opportunity. Yes. तो यहाँ पे चाहे SCRI लिखो, आत्मनिर्भर भारत, PLI, etc. सब लिखा भी है यहाँ पे. So diversify the supply chains. Use these kind of keywords. China +1 strategy. Examiner will know what this means. Restrict FDI. चलो ठीक है. Sensitive sectors. Yes. And a lot of these points are already coming from the challenges that you have seen, right? फिर incentivize production of APIs, semiconductors, telecom. Yes. Cyber security you have to strengthen. So CERT in national data protection, AI, etc. So economic front pe you know what is to be done. On the regional front, again SCO, BRICS, they were very helpful in resumption of dialogue. Okay. Similarly, अब यहां पे ये पॉइंट बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है हमारा पूरा का पूरा पॉइंट. Assertiveness of China on Indian Ocean will be countered via Quad. Although it is not said कि Quad is a military grouping, and Quad has a very diversified nature of portfolio, but still, what is Quad composed of? India, US, Australia, Japan. Quad के केस में all of them have the shared objectives of promoting what? Free, open, inclusive, Indo-Pacific. ठीक है? All of them have the shared order. चलो एक सेकंड, let me quickly discuss with you on Quad only here itself. Quad, you know what is the objective? Free, open, inclusive. They will do joint patrolling, defense cooperation, not just defense, even counter-terrorism. In fact, economic cooperation, disaster, everything. So first, remember, it is related to Indo-Pacific. Remember the 4 countries. Other than that, for Quad, remember areas of cooperation. Main thing, remember, Quad is not just a military group which Russia and China perceive it to be. This is a group for development cooperation. पर ये तो ये बोल रहे हैं, right? They also may have their own motives. अब main thing I want to ask you, the challenges which Quad faces, ये बताओ आप. Dominated by US, ठीक है, और सोचो. ठीक है, चलो, good point is that it has an anti-China focus, and the point is the perception is it is a anti-China focus. This is the perception. But मुझे practical problem बताओ इसमें. What is the major issue? I'll tell you. Australia is saying that you want to have all these exercises, but Australia is heavily dependent on China's economy. Same is also true with US. Same is also true with India. तो ये एक issue है. This is the reality of today's world. You know a term known as economic interdependence. लड़ाई का मन भी है पर लड़ाई कर नहीं सकते. Why? Because the cost of war will be very high. Whenever you have to go for a war, you have to calculate the cost, right? What is the opportunity cost? If you have something to gain, nations will go for a war. Here they have more to lose. Australia has the issue, deeply integrated with supply chains. US is deeply integrated. That is why, you know, the US has the CHIPS Act. They now want to make their own semiconductors, chips, etc. But the issue, USA was also facing the same issue, hugely connected with China. India also has this issue, deep. Other than that, all these 3 countries have a differing perception of Indo-Pacific. कैसे? India के लिए Indo-Pacific में Indian Ocean is important, but for US, Pacific will also be equally important. Yes or no? So they will have different perceptions of Indo-Pacific. So the moment now you see a topic, उसके countries सोचो, all the countries can never come into exact consensus. They will always have their competing different priorities. So for topics, if you still have some issue, कुछ points नहीं बन रहे हैं, break down, see the core objectives, see their respective priorities, and then write an answer. तो इसमें आराम से आप बता सकते हो what are the challenges, which is why Quad is facing an issue, which is why BRICS will face an issue, which is why all the groups can never be successful. They will have broad areas of cooperation, पर individually global geopolitics is very different. Okay, that is a concern. चलो coming back. यहां पे लिखा हुआ है महासागर, जहां भी लिखे अब याद कर लो, सागर तो लिखो ही, बट महासागर जरूर लिख के आना, ठीक है? We can again climate diplomacy, we can use it for multilateral norms, fine. Cultural में I don't think there is anything which you do not know. Revive cultural exchange, Kailash Yatra, Brahmaputra sharing, Buddhism, Ayurveda, etc. Main point is that will leverage your cultural diplomacy. Now coming to this conclusion. Despite episodes of trust deficit, the idea of dragon elephant tango reflects aspirational values of peaceful coexistence between two Asian giants. अब यहां पे पहले हमने we show an aspiration, but in the second line we are again putting a checks and balance. Here we saying terms and condition that India should engage, okay, but it should also hedge. What is the meaning of hedge? India should hedge its bets, should not go with all eggs in one basket. Cooperate, but compete. How can India compete? China plus one strategy. India can also bring a lot of money to its own fold as it reclaims its place in the Asian century. So second part is a very practical approach. ऐसा नहीं होगा कि we only say from the idealistic part. Same if the question comes, if India and US have to cooperate, that should India always go for the USA? By India, if India did not, let's say, fight against S4, this CARSA sanctions, India would have never got S400. Right? India was able to again buy the cheap oil and again sell it across. India was again able to buy things from Iran as well. So point is, India should always have its options open. This tells you strategic autonomy. Is this clear? ये काफी practical है. It has a lot of keywords associated. I hope people here are able to follow. ठीक है? Okay. इसके बाद I think there's a US China होगा ना? हाँ, okay. Let me see if it is here. Otherwise, I'll just. हाँ. Hmm. नहीं, बट चाइना प्लस वन स्ट्रेटेजी ओवरऑल इज अ ब्रॉड फ्रेमवर्क. आप जो बता रहे हो, हम अगर इफ यू टॉक अबाउट डाइवर्सिफिकेशन, you can talk about how India can, though there are two viewpoints. Number one, you can create your own manufacturing very strong. That is आत्मनिर्भर, कि हमारी जो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग है, हमारा जो हाई डिपेंडेंस है, हम उसको कम करेंगे. Idea of China plus one is that India can also be a market for or be an alternative to China. So that sentiment will always remain true. In fact, the issue with which we are seeing with the US-China trade war, that India can again find a place there, yes or no? Because if China is going to lose some market, India can also capture it. That is again what? China plus one. That is the idea of China plus one. तो आप इसको ऐसे भी लिख सकते हो that India can find its place as an alternative to China, which we are already doing with other countries also, like-minded countries. जब हम AGC पे जा रहे हैं, which is also an alternative to China. But government directly देखो, और भी I think I'll have to again just verify and cross-check once. But in many places, what we have used the word is we also want to be a market as an alternative to China, even if we don't use the term China plus one. One is using the term, but other is using the sentiment that we want to create an alternative. So here, in fact, in a lot of articles, in fact, ये भी जो भी है, are only from some of the very recent articles that I've written here. So you can use it, but if you don't want to, if there's a hesitation, you can use the idea that one, you want to have stronger supply chains. उसके लिए आत्मनिर्भर भारत PLI है, but you also want to project yourself to get more economic goods. दोनों चीजें ओपन है. And with the tariff war, this will even become more pronounced. ठीक है? Next आ जाओ. अच्छा, that is not here, but चलो I'll quickly talk to you about. Handout है, handout extra एक ना. Now, this is a very good proverb to start with. When two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. So by what a very basic definition of trade war is mentioned here: tit for tat tariffs between nations to counter perceived unfair practices. Right? It disrupts global supply chains, raises production costs, so slows economic growth. ये पूरे का पूरा it is also mentioned in the global impact of trade wars. Now, timeline देखते हैं. What you are seeing right now is not the first time. During Trump 1.0 also this was started, right? तो पहला है Trump initiated this wars on citing IP theft. What is IP? Intellectual property and trade imbalance. Corresponding point देखो जरा core triggers में trade imbalance between US and China. Just see the level. There's a huge deficit between these two countries. 2024, now come back to the timeline. Trump reintroduces a 10% reciprocal tariff and China retaliates with hikes from 84 to 125%. अब देखो, tariff war does not mean trade has stopped. Yes? Why? Before you read through this, what do you think is the rationale of Trump having a tariff? क्यों? देखो, पहली बात तो they know that the global manufacturing एक तरह से supply chain is from China. China dumps a lot. They have economies of scale. They have all the advantages. Tariff का idea क्या है? So that your product can also compete. So if your product is priced at rupees 100, Chinese product is priced at 75. If they flood the market, you are going to get lost. So Trump's actions here are also indicative of the sentiment of a lot of corporations and industries. जहाँ demand थी कि भाई we are not able to compete with the Chinese products. Number one, पहला issue है. Do you also remember that he has also brought a lot of tariffs in India also? Harley Davidson अब जो लेगा जो भी, if you know, huge tariffs are there also. So again, what is the core idea? That he felt that China, India are misusing these and they're getting a lot of benefit out of it. पहले भी इंडिया के पास जो last point है that India was also impacted via GSP. What is GSP? Generalized system of preferences. So because of that, India used to get very fair deals at a lower price, but now that has been withdrawn from India. तो इसमें Trump या trade war में core issue is IP theft. In fact, USA says India also has a poor IP protection. यहाँ पे you can also write a report जहाँ पे लिखा है GSP वाले point पे US has a special 301 report which has highlighted India having poor IP protection. Special 301 report. अब आते हैं core triggers पे. This is the timeline what happened, but what was actually triggering point, right? पहला तो already is trade imbalance. Huge trade imbalance was happening. This also shows to you huge wings of China. पहला issue. दूसरा, acquisition of unfair tech practices by China. किस कंपनी का एग्जाम्पल लिख सकते हैं? Huawei. Okay. Huawei initially was supposed to do all the 5G work for USA or around 2018-2019, but just after that US changed the terms of trade and all of these things started to happen. So Huawei became almost the villain. That is just one company. There are other companies that were accused. Ab USA has started supply chain decoupling. Use these keywords. Supply chain decoupling. कैसे? Chips Act. What is this chips? To make Lays, Kurkure? नहीं. Semiconductor chips. Okay. And main issue is semiconductors में कौन है market leader? Taiwan. So US will also now use Taiwan against China. यहाँ पे you know the term one China policy? What is one China policy? That if you have to talk to any of the part of China, you only have to talk to the main Chinese government. You cannot talk to, let's say, Republic of Taiwan or let's say any other part or Tibet, because China sees all of them as a part of its own. तो जहां चिप्स एक्ट लिखा है यहाँ पे जस्ट दो चीजें लिखो, एक ताइवान लिखना फॉर योर रेफरेंस, हैविंग अ लीडर, एंड ऑल्सो ब्रैकेट में लिखना वन चाइना पॉलिसी, एंड यूएसए विल यूज इट टू इट्स ओन एडवांटेज. वन चाइना पॉलिसी में यूएसए वुड यूज इट टू इट्स ओन एडवांटेज. Then there is compact between India and US. When we do India and US, we will again see this, right? This just put a dash इसमें. This is for technology collaboration. Compact जो है between India and USA is for defense and technology cooperation. So this also is a part of decoupling, right? Now Vietnam ties. What is happening with Vietnam? अच्छा, ASEAN में Vietnam has a huge market, right? So now they are also getting closer to Vietnam, just as a move to decouple with China. So Vietnam, bracket में लिखो ASEAN. So you'll remember in ASEAN, the very huge market is of Vietnam. So right now Vietnam is also becoming very popular. अब है geopolitics. Taiwan I've already told you. South China Sea से you'll remember what? 9-dash line. AI and quantum supremacy. अब देखो, we said that technology as a determinant of foreign policy. इससे पहले quantum supremacy, सबसे पहले there was a Google Sycamore chip, right? नाम सुना है? So Google had a Sycamore, SYCA. This was the first to demonstrate quantum supremacy. Very recently in the prelims also, Majorana had come. Majorana was made by Microsoft. But very startlingly for USA, China has made huge inroads in quantum supremacy, right? And again because of that, they are again poised to be, again this can also be part of hard power also. तो उसको भी down करने के लिए, so when you see geopolitics, what is politics actually in one line? The struggle for power. And now power now does not rely just with material resources, natural resources or human resources. It also is there with the new technological frontiers. इसीलिए semiconductors, AI, quantum, you will get questions on this, either in GS2 or GS3, depending on what the examiner wants to ask you. And last is tariff evasion. So China reroutes the exports via Vietnam and Malaysia, which again is a part where they wanted to penalize it. अब आ जाओ global impact पे, just see the keyword, you'll again understand. देखो, if अच्छा देखो दोनों अलग अलग है. Compact is between India and USA. Compact is India और USA के बीच defense and technology modernization partnership, very recently signed between India and USA. So heading is strategic या supply chain decoupling, right? So stronger ties between India and USA means जो lesser reliance on China also. Second, their ties with Vietnam are also getting stronger, and they already have their own CHIPS Act. So CHIPS Act जरूर लिखना. Now, if a trade war is happening, तो सबसे पहले there can be a recession, because China and USA, they have 43% of global GDP, and WTO has warned a 7% GDP hit. Okay, all of that is there in your handout only. Baki to market can be volatile, can lead to inflation triggers. There is this is an important key term, technology cold war. Weaponization of rare earth, EV supply chains. This is again a new frontier of war that we are seeing. तो यहां पे जहां लिखा है टेक कोल्ड वॉर, जस्ट राइट अ हेडिंग, कोल्ड वॉर 2.0, CW 2.0. Then when China is subject to such tariffs, again as a mechanism it can again go for dumping. So Chinese surplus goods, जो solar है, steel है, again they are manufacturers here, this can also again cause the market to fluctuate. और last step, polarization. This is an important point. देखो polarization क्यों, ब्रैकेट में दिमाग में सोचो WTO. Why was WTO there in the first place? Free and fair trade. Now when trade war is happening, isn't this also a failure of WTO to some extent? So when I say polarization, it means it weakens multilateral institutions like WTO. And WTO is already weak. Why? DSB. Since 2022, there has been no proper appointment, stalled by the US only. Right? Now, अब जब impact आएगा इंडिया पे, you have to write both the sides. सिर्फ एक साइड नहीं लिखना है. impact India पे थोड़ा negative भी है, but there can also be a positive to it, which is why the notes are structured in this manner, positive and negative for India, both. Now, negative we already know, India has a huge dependency of electronics, API, pharma, so this will lead to a supply chain disruption. Yes or no? पहला issue है. दूसरा, there can be a growth dip. In fact, India's GDP also fell, showing that there was an impact of the first trade war which happened around 2018 on के आसपास. Then again, basic economics, if there is inflation, imports will be costly, and India imports a lot. Yes or no? So for us, the overall price of goods, etc., for households, the purchasing power will also take a hit. Yes. And even in the financial markets, the rupee fell, which also shows that trade war. In fact, when he had announced these tariffs on those days and almost for a week, the markets crashed by a huge element. Yes or no? But India can also stand to gain. We've also seen a Abda mein Afsar, that in almost every disaster you can find a new way out. So here, especially wherever India is strong, so be it textiles, chemicals, IT, etc., when the trade is getting diverted, China is also losing its market. India has good competitive advantage, so वहाँ पे export gains होंगे. Second, soybean exports to China rose post the US bans. So again, there will be agriculture boost also. And lastly, for example, tech outsourcing. A lot of Chinese tech firms are not getting contracts. Indian firms are getting contracts. Why? नहीं, decoupling भी सही, but same चीज. Again, अच्छा, एक चीज मैंने आपको नहीं बताई. Whenever you see any country relations, also see their political system, right? So USA and India, what is the common part? They are democracies, right? They have similar ideologies. India and China don't have it, which is why there is also a lot of mistrust. Anything coming out of China, any statistic coming out of China is always viewed with a lot of mistrust, okay? Because there is a huge state censorship that is going on. All right? Solutions may again revive WTO, important point. South trade, so India, Africa, and here also ASEAN will become very important, which is why again nations like Philippines and even Vietnam, which have strong bases, they can also become very important. Okay? Then strengthen APEC, BRICS, SCO. Main thing is why you want to have more multilateral institutions talking about this trade war. Agar institutions hain, so let us use them for dialogue mechanisms. This can help in de-escalation. Okay? India strategy mein again you have PLI, China plus one hub, via Gati Shakti, using of Quad or BRICS. Okay, and establish trade watchdog for tariff alerts. So we know when exactly to reroute. So these are a lot of practical steps that India can take to combat this. Last में, what is the quote? A trade war rarely has true winners. Only shifting cost. What is the meaning? Ultimately, the cost has to be paid. If not now, maybe later. So there is no winner. Both the parties will have to lose. But again, it is their own quest for the superpower ambitions. Now we move to the next neighbor. In the neighborhood, actually, the China part actually takes time. Post that, almost the similar framework we'll have a look at. अब किस तरह से आप ध्यान रखोगे? Generic points, all of you know. If anything is very specific, if any head of state has visited, if there is a new, let's say, framework, if there is nothing new, कोई भी scheme है, कोई नया चीज है, उसको बस underline करते रहना. Otherwise, the framework is very easy to understand. Okay? Now, with Bhutan, just try to recall, how are our relations with Bhutan? Very good. Amongst all the neighbors which have almost gotten very close to China, it is one neighbor which is again very close to India. Anything else for Bhutan that you know? Gross national happiness? Or kuch? Carbon neutral or even carbon negative, right? This is an important point. इसको हम आगे भी देखेंगे. Now, here these are good relations, mutual trust hai, cultural ties, strategic cooperation, very critical partner as India goes through its development goals. Now, some of the names just try to remember because kahin kahin pe likhne mein kaam aa sakta hai. So sharing, top gaze, recent visit actually happened. And in all these neighbor countries, I've given the current context also, that why are we covering it specifically? If there is some new outcome that has happened, right? So this new recent visit had happened of the Bhutanese PM. Now, diplomatic foundation hai, 1949 ki, there is a treaty of peace and friendship which is governing the whole nature of relations between the two countries. Okay? It is helping in institutionalization of bilateral ties. अब देखो जो भी पुरानी treaties हैं, they have been revised. Why do you think they would have been revised? Better terms of trade. और एक और issue है, many cases में the issue was that there was feeling that the terms were not equal, right? India was not respecting sovereignty in some cases. इसलिए it is also being said for Bhutan also and Nepal, which is why the revision actually had to take place. So now the treaty has been reformed to ensure all these lacunas have been done away with. But treaty can be periodically revised. कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है. ठीक है? Formal relations है. Historical part you can use it for your answers also. Oldest diplomatic relations. अब आते हैं main चीज पे. इस तरह के आपको सारी countries में mind maps मिलेंगे. ठीक है? This is more than enough to know what you need to know. सारे current topics, हर चीज, everything I've tried to mention here. Now, strategic. क्या सोचोगे? पहले location. सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट, why is Bhutan important for India? It is a buffer state. Location is between. So India and China, and very critical part you have to write is India's chicken neck, Siliguri corridor. Right? Now, in 2017, there was a Doklam standoff. Is Doklam a part of India? It is a part of Bhutan. But in Doklam standoff, India played a very important role, right? So India upheld their territorial integrity under the treaty. Now this was again a very important standpoint, that it was not directly affecting India, but because again the terms of treaty tells us that we will protect our neighbors. So we went ahead, okay? Then there are road connectivity projects. One is IMTRAT, I'll just tell you the full form also. And there is Dantak. Dantak is being made by the Border Roads Organization, BRO. So these are strategic projects, okay? IMTRAT is just Indian military training team. It is training the Bhutanese military, and project Dantak is by BRO. It is building the strategic infrastructure in the Himalayas. That is strategic element of it, right? अगर क्वेश्चन फिर से अगर areas of cooperation पे भी आएगा तो आप इसको modify कर सकते हो same चीज को. तो जब confuse मत हो significance and cooperation में. In many parts I've also bifurcated them, but there's also an overlap between significance and cooperation. Yes or no? Economic. There is hydropower cooperation. HEPs here means hydroelectric power plants. Constructed. Bhutan exports surplus power to India. So these are two specific Bhutanese dams. Okay, कोई भी नाम याद हो जाए रख कर सकते हो. One of the recent HEPs that was constructed, that was, spelling check कर लेना, most probably शायद Punat Sangchu 2. This is almost on the verge of completion, which is why the PM actually was overseeing how much progress was done on this. So Punat Sangchu was one of the hydropower corporation dams which is being constructed. ये सबसे recent है, ऐसे तो 3 और हैं, सबसे recent याद रखो, right? अब trade. India is the largest trade partner. FTA is going on since 1972. 50% of Bhutan's FDI is Indian. Whatever fact you are able to recall या remember, वो याद रखो. You're not necessary सब याद रखने, सबसे आसान तो है India is the largest trading partner. Now, 13th 5-year plan. पर इंडिया में तो 5-year plan खत्म हो गए थे. Why is 13th mentioned here? because Bhutan has its 5-year plan. Okay, this is Bhutan's 5-year plan. So Bhutan, in its Bhutan के 12th 5-year plan में we included 5,000 crore, and we've also extended support to Bhutan's 13th 5-year plan. Yeah, we can talk about it. In the development cooperation you can add. एक और point development cooperation बना सकते हैं. Even for soft power that can also be a good point. Now green energy and connectivity. अब यहाँ पे again there is a green hydrogen bus, clean mobility, and with green energy just remember Bhutan again is a carbon negative. So again it is investing in these projects. Second is this is important, you can write this. इसको बहुत 2-3 साल से न्यूज में चल रहा है. Galefu mindfulness city. So India is supporting Bhutan's plan for a carbon neutral city, and when Galefu project will be done, it is also bordering to Assam and other Indian states. So other Indian states cooperation is also needed in the Galefu mindfulness city. Now generally what happens when you're doing your bilateral countries, भूटान में नेपाल में बहुत बार स्पेसिफिक पॉइंट्स नहीं याद आते अपने को. तो व्हेन यू हैव योर नोट्स सिर्फ बाकी डायमेंशन सब आपको याद आएंगे एग्जाम में. मेन चीज है वहां पे रिकॉल कर पाना सम स्पेसिफिक टर्म्स. दैट इज गोइंग टू बी डिफरेंशिएटर बिटवीन अ लेट्स से एवरेज आंसर एंड अ मोर एनरिच्ड आंसर, राइट? सो मे बी वन थिंग यू कैन रिमेंबर. देन यू हैव ट्रांस बाउंड्री कंजर्वेशन, रॉयल मानस नेशनल पार्क एंड द मानस नेशनल पार्क बिटवीन इंडिया एंड भूटान. दिस इज ऑल्सो एन एरिया ऑफ कोऑपरेशन. ठीक है. Now soft power, so of course Buddhism is there. Pilgrimage statue of Zad Brung was returned by India. GNH is gross national happiness, and a lot of Indian philosophies resonate. So again one of the Buddhist figures, the pilgrimage and statue was returned. So again this was helping in give a lot of soft power relevance. In education and healthcare, there is also scholarships, hospitals, vaccine diplomacy. There is a cooperation. Last वाला जो point है digital connectivity. So this is a point you can write digital drukgyul. Digital drukgyul is also where the integration of Indian apps like Bheem and RuPay has happened. So this is a part you can think about financial inclusion also. Right? And how Indian services are also helping in the transformation of other areas. So Buddhism hai, education, all these are broader points. These are the points of significance between India and Bhutan. ठीक है? Now if I go to the challenges between India and Bhutan, now this will be very easy to talk about. Right? Ab. Just see these three. What is common? China. And all three are different points in their own domain. Number one, China's trade surge. So first of all, earlier Chinese investment was not really much, not trade was also less. Now this surge is increasing, and this has almost increased to 25%, which again can be a cause of worry to India. Number one. China, Bhutan, rapprochement. What is the meaning of rapprochement? Reconciliation. So this is actually happening on Doklam. Earlier there was a standoff, and now there is a China-Bhutan rapprochement, especially happening in the Doklam area, and this also is related to India's border security. And there have been reports that even Bhutan has agreed to the, let's say, inspection of Chinese military officials and them being present, and there is a talk of infrastructure also being created around the borders. If this is going to happen, what is the issue? India will always feel, again, the Siliguri corridor, chicken necks, and again from India's internal security point of view, this will be a challenge. Yes or no? Fair. China's 5-finger policy. This always is from a territorial ambition point of view. This is a challenge. Okay. Now we talk of stalled projects. So again, the HEPs, for example, that we saw, okay, or other connectivity projects, they have taken a long time. So अब जब भी project long time लेगा तो क्या होगा? There will be cost overruns, plus this will also create mistrust in the people. Now there are some, although this has not happened too much, this happens more in Nepal, but there have been instances where some militant groups have just gone to the side of Bhutan, after carrying out their acts. So sometimes this can also be used as a safe haven, safe harbor. There are also concerns on this front. On the hydropower discontent, main issue is Bhutan's view this as one-sided or deeply lopsided in the favor of India. Yes. Which I think, एक सेकंड रुकना, नहीं तो यहां पे मैं ऐड कर सकता हूं. We know this BBIN. What is BBIN? Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal. Now BBIN was supposed to be implemented in Bhutan. What was the issue? The people are very pro-environment. If this project is to be implemented, this will lead to emissions, negative impact on environment. Second, the HEP projects, this is also going to damage the environment. So in this case of Bhutan, the people are very much conscious and alert. If any of these issues happen, they have raised this voice. So आप BBIN specific लिख सकते हो. Stalled projects में भी this point can come, that BBIN is stalled specifically because of this reason. Other projects have their own concerns, but BBIN में a lot of the people are protesting that this will again, let's say, this will be very detrimental to environment. Same issue is with other HEPs. Hydroelectric power projects can also be damaging environment. So this is again how this becomes a challenge, which also leads to loss of trust among people. Okay. Now if we have understood till here, now if we have to go for a way forward, almost इसी तरह से हमने देखा था way forward. Strategic recalibration, जैसे कि ensuring autonomy of Bhutan, because again one point challenge में यहाँ पे you can even add big brother attitude. This almost is common for all the South Asian nations. The feeling of big brother, that India is intervening too much, the big brother syndrome. So what are we doing? How are we recalibrating? Ensuring autonomy of Bhutan while countering Chinese assertiveness. How can this happen? When there is a continuous dialogue. When India also shares its concern, Bhutan also shares its concern. Plus we also have to be very non-reciprocity हम कह सकते हैं. Plus we are in all these countries. अगर आपसे क्वेश्चन यह है that increasing Chinese influence in our neighbors, does it have an impact on Indian foreign policy? Just try to think, बताओ. What is the impact? And should India be concerned if there is a increasing Chinese influence? Yes. But what can India do about it if there is increasing Chinese influence? Now here, Gujarat doctrine we can say, but यहाँ पे just in our minds, see, India is also having relations with US and also Russia and also France and even China and so many other countries. So can we expect our neighbors to only have relations with us? पहले बताओ. Good? नहीं, पहले बताओ. Just answer my question. Should India expect them to only have one partner? नहीं. So India also has to be very mature in that front. Second is India has to do two things. Number one, explain the exploitative practices of China, including debt trap, right? but at the same time present an alternate model. India already has a lot of soft power. तो अगर इंडिया अपना एक मॉडल देगा डेवलपमेंट का, which India tries to give, it will generate. Now it is the choice of the neighbor if it wants to be in a debt trap or it wants to be a part of India. Now it can be in a debt trap. कैसे? वहां की government, if that is pro-China, if the government is already handing gloves with China, but even then there will be elections. They can be also voted out of power. Yes or no? So the answer to this question, that what should be the solution to China's assertiveness or rise, is simple. That India has to maintain continuous dialogue. India has to ensure its development, that it goes on. But at the same time, you have to expose via some international forums, organizations, the vicious debt trap, the exploitative practices that happen. But most important is your own democratic values and your form of development. Last में हमेशा sovereign की choice होती है. So it is ultimately the choice of your neighbor, whether they want to face a crisis like Sri Lanka, or if they want to again have a more better terms of trade. Is this fine? Which again is a point line with this. Presence in multilateral forums and ensure diplomatic responsiveness. Jitne bhi points are, now you will easily connect what is the thought process behind it. This is one dimension, strategic recalibration. Second is diversification. Now this diversification will actually help Bhutan. Bhutan का क्या claim है? The trade is one-sided, favor of India. You will help FDI से हर चीज diversify, tourism, digital, education, agriculture. हाँ, good point. Bhutan is landlocked, right? So that is why India gives a lot of, let's say, allocation to their 5-year plans. But in other areas, you have to help them diversify and give them a fair deal. That is the main idea, right? Sustainability. This is also where you can counter Chinese debt trap. Yes, and you can also counter the themes. For example, themes like hydrogen, carbon neutral infrastructure, nature conservation. ये point Bhutan के साथ बहुत सही जाएगा. And with European and countries, you will see with European countries, India has a lot of cooperation on clean energy, clean water, right? So sustainability can be one dimension. And last, of course, is a thing that we've always seen is cultural. That is ultimately what? Educational ties, visa liberalization, Buddhist diplomacy, right? That is what we can talk. Ultimately from people to people lens. Okay, that is how you can think. Let's move to the next one. These are relatively smaller. This is Nepal. इसमें भी I have directly linked this to the current element here. KP Sharma's Oli return as PM of Nepal. Okay. Now what things can be happening और क्या हो सकता है यहाँ पे बस just now quickly, now your eyes will be trained. First is historically Treaty of Peace and Friendship. This was in 1950. Now this has the basis for open borders and close cooperation. Now with India, Nepal, any other thing that comes to your mind in the general parlance that you have heard, seen or written कहीं देखा हो? Treaty of Sogoli, good. और कुछ जो न्यूज़ में सुनाओ? चलो dispute, Lipu Lake, Limpiadhura, the distorted maps of 2020. Anything else? Madheshi is very good. Okay, which again India tried to play a role and India also got a lot of backlash also for it. Fine. Correct. Even during the earthquake of 2015. Then there is Roti Beti Ka Rishta. Okay, very deep social bonds, intermarriages. Okay, even now you will see a lot of people around the areas of Bihar, UP also marrying the people who have Madheshi roots, etc. So this happens. Economic interdependence hai. Now this you will easily understand. अब इसमें क्या करा है मैंने significance अलग कर दिया है and cooperation is different. But you will understand from the headings only that significance only 3 broad dimensions. We are thinking one is strategic, always is the location. Now Nepal also is very important. Why? Why is the location of Nepal important? Buffer state, again as a buffer, also important for India's neighborhood first. Yes or no? So any development that happens in Nepal is important for India's internal security also. Right? कल्चरल टाइज है यहाँ पे बहुत पुराने, इकोनॉमिक लिंकेजेस, लेबर, रेमिटेंसेस, रीजनल मार्केट्स, दैट यू नो. नाउ लेट्स डायरेक्टली कम टू दिस. राइट, इन वन माइंड मैप एवरीथिंग इज कवर्ड. व्हाट यू नीड टू नो, अब इसमें जो भी काम की चीजें उसको हाईलाइट करेंगे. व्हाट इज द मिलिट्री एक्सरसाइज? सूर्य किरण. दिस गोज इन डिफेंस. Gorkha regiment recruitment from Nepal into Indian army also. However, challenge was there with respect to Agnipath scheme, right? So defense में there is a lot of cooperation. In energy and connectivity, 2003 MOU here is memorandum of understanding. So around 10,000 megawatts of electricity was given for over a period of 10 years. So this is going to be very beneficial for them. Again, India, Nepal share a lot of rivers. So this hydel cooperation, hydropower cooperation is beneficial, number one. This please underline, Motihari Amlekganj. This is a petroleum pipeline, operational. Plus there are future plans for Siliguri, Japa and Amlekganj, Chitwan. In terms of water, which is again why you have a lot of hydropower corporation. In the Ganga river basin, there are a huge number of rivers, more than 250 plus, which flow from Nepal to Ganga. Bilkul, bilkul. These are some very prominent ones. Okay. Now, in the economic part, right? India is Nepal's largest trading partner. Wherever you find these kind of lines, this is what is easy to remember. Second is, if you can know, 40% FDI is coming. So huge economic part. ICP means integrated checkposts. How are ICPs helpful? Okay, so for overall better management. Okay. Yes, so better border management के लिए. And then integrated है checkposts है, so you can again have better connectivity also, better collection, better surveillance. That is why integrated checkposts are there. Okay. So this is Rupaidiya, Nepalganj. There is Raxol, Kathmandu, some of the important names highlighted here. In economic also, you are noting how if there is UPI based transactions, we are also mentioning that. इस साल भी सवाल आया था, how many countries accept? Okay, fine. This is also a part. तो ऐसे dimensions नहीं miss करने हमें कि भाई in which areas are you cooperating, right? BBIN from the name N से नेपाल है तो नेपाल होगा ही. SAARC में there in BIMSTEC also in NAM. And last is even in disaster management there is a lot of cooperation between these countries. Now first responder during the earthquake, but this was also criticized. Later on it was also said India had also put a blockade. So there was also this was also criticized on this front. There is an alleged part. COVID-19 aid. Now during COVID-19 India has been very much vocal with this vaccine Maitri. तो ये जब भी हम बात करेंगे that India's candidature or India's voice of global south, all these points you can talk about, right? In fact, India being the first responder of crisis is also true in Indian Ocean. Indian Ocean में when we say we are a net security provider. BIMSTEC platform again used for regional disaster response coordination. These are the areas of cooperation, right? Now, some developments that have happened, यहाँ पे भी बस couple of things I will highlight. There was a very recent joint commission. Okay, agreements have happened. Again, nothing very particular, but this is generally what happens when commissions or the heads of state generally meet. इसमें सबसे important point ये है, which also I'll write in the way forward. The eminent persons group report had mentioned, okay, it has awaited implementation. Why? The treaty of 1950 is yet to be updated or revisited. और treaty में सबसे बड़े issues क्या हैं? According to Nepal, India's big brother attitude, India's interfering nature, not giving enough space, not having enough avenues to diversify. So in your way forward in Nepal, this is one point you will always quote, citing the eminent person group report has not been implemented yet. Okay, now challenges देखते हैं. बाकी तो चलो, there is a line of credit. If you remember, you can also add these points in cooperation only, right? almost all these terms you know, right? From Chinese influence hai. China is a part of BRI, okay? Plus FDI is increasing in trans-Himalayan rail projects. So this is an issue of Chinese influence. What is the border dispute? Just you need to know. In the 2020 map, Kalapani, Lipu Lake, Limpiadhura, they were said to be the part of Nepali territory. Ab yahan pe bhi you can draw a dotted line and connect it to China. Because it is alleged that it only happened because of increasing Chinese influence. Because during this time, India had a clash with China with Galwan 2020. Then border and migration issues. ये point जिसके साथ भी आप border share करोगे common है, right? Human trafficking, cattle trafficking, arms trafficking, drugs trafficking, all of that will be there. Insurgent groups can also cross the border. There's an issue of big brother perception, which is also highlighted in the treaty also. Now here also you have stalled projects, which is also a common point, right? Many projects, including the ones that we are seeing, a lot of these pipeline projects, they took a lot of time. So this is again an issue. And last, ye important hai, the Madheshi issue. This is a more specific point. India's support to Madheshi agitation, it led to a blockade. Pehla to ek issue ye hai. Dusra, India also supported the cause of Madheshi in the Nepali constitution, which was seen by Nepalis as too much infringing on their own rights. Okay? So this is a point you also have to know, which is why they also want to change the treaty of 1950. The nature of polity, you can also say that here also you have the issue which I told you in the initial part, that pro-China, pro-India, these kind of issues will also happen. This also again happens in Bangladesh. You also know BNP party, you know. So when the parties in Bangladesh change, one is always pro-India. You have Awami League and the BNP. So again, one is pro-India, one is pro-China or anti-India. Yes, by China in India. How come? Acha, वैसे नहीं, but you can say that both of them want to exert their own influence. How they do it is not specifically. अब आप अगर ये बोलोगे directly, तो this will go against our own idea that we are not interventionists. So we respect the sovereignty, yes or no, तो हम वैसे लिखेंगे उसको. हाँ. यहाँ तक clear है? अब आते हैं way forward. अब इसमें भी हर एक point के साथ जो respective keyword है, that also is mentioned here. पहले तो hands off political approach, because big brother attitude is being mentioned. What is hands off? Simple. Avoid micromanagement. Respect sovereignty. Simple है. People to people ties कैसे? तो kinship, culture, soft power, okay. Regional forums to be utilized, this we know. Hydropower के केस में even trilateral energy trade agreements, because again through Nepal also, and this is Nepal, this is India, this is Bangladesh, these experiments are also being tried. So this is the trilateral agreement which also will help Bangladesh secure more Nepal secure more clients. Expedite projects, goes without saying. Border safety, because we already have a lot of issues at the borders, right? And the diplomacy can be inclusive in the sense that again abhi jaise kuch issues hain remaining, right, from the review of the treaty, etc. If they cannot be solved directly from the institutional mechanism, like we are trying for a long time, if you want to improve the perception, then you can add terms like track to dialogue. इस point को link करना पड़ेगा, that you have to link how this perception, main perception between, क्या main perception है India और नेपाल में issue है? One is interventionist. Second is India feels that they are very pro-China. अब इसको आप government to government solve नहीं कर पा रहे हो, for example, then what you will go for? This track 2. So when you write this inclusive diplomacy, write this will be for better perceptions, perception management or sharing each other's concern. This is how you'll, let's say, talk about it. तो जो भी point है, अब इसी point को किसी और country में modify करके किसी और use में लिख सकते हो. Yes sir. Next, last में देखते हैं, just underline keywords here. The relations are rich in civilizational depth, for example geostrategic importance, and there is a lot of economic interdependence. Acknowledge किया हमने issues हैं, तो despite periodic tensions, roti beti the bond, this roti beti bond, okay, the shared challenges and mutual opportunities can pave the way for, अब यहां पे जानबूझ के sovereign लिखा है, because this is a concern that they have highlighted, that they feel this sovereignty is not respected. So stable, sovereign, synergistic partnership can be there. And when you read this again, I'm telling you, you don't have to cram कि ये रट के लिख के आना है. See the conclusion only as an idea, because then you can have your own conclusions. Of course, a couple of keywords can help, but nobody can remember this verbatim. तो इतनी टेंशन मत लेना आप कि exactly मुझे रट के वही लिख के आना है. ठीक है? अच्छा ठीक है. Now we head for a break. We will then start with Bangladesh. After Bangladesh, चलो इसमें तो काफी कुछ करंट का है बताने वाला. ठीक है. अच्छा, after this we have Pakistan and then other countries and then we move to the next part. Okay, so it is 1:20 now. People who are following this online now, in your group you will get a new link. Please join from the new link. ठीक है. In the second part we'll do remaining neighbors. We'll do act east वाला part, that is again a simple part. तो वो करते हैं next part में. ठीक है. Okay.